Council President, committee members, and participants, we are now live.
Thank you. And good morning to everyone. Before we begin the public hearing, I'd like to make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat to public health from COVID-19, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft's Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, the Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. We've established our quorum. Mr. McDermott, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, please indicate that you are present.
Councilmember Bass.
Good morning, Mr. President and colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Driscoll. Councilmember Gautier.
Good morning, Council President and colleagues. Present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Harity.
Good morning, everybody. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Jones.
Good morning, Mr. President, colleagues. I'm present.
Bob, did you hear me, Bob? I sound like I got cut off.
Oh. I've marked you down for the record. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Bob. Somebody else.
Councilmember Lozada. Councilmember O'Neill.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Councilmember Phillips.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Councilmember Squilla.
Good morning, Council President, colleagues. Present.
Councilmember Thomas.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. I'm present.
Good morning.
And Councilmember Vaughn.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We've established our quorum, and the hearing is now called to order. This is the continued public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 230-144, 230-145, 230-146, 230-147, 230-148, 230-149, and resolution number 230-162. Mr. McDermott, please read the titles of the bills and resolution.
Bill number 230144, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2024 to 2029 inclusive. Bill number 230145, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2024 capital budget. Bill number 230146, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2024. Bill number 230147, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1500 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Wage and Net Profits Taxes by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 230148, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2800 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority on Taxes and Net Profits, to provide for the continuation of the tax and to make other conforming changes, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 230149, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2600 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Business Income and Receipts Taxes by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 230162, providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2024 through 2028 and incorporating revised changes with respects to fiscal year 2023, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement authorized by an ordinance of this Council approved by the Mayor on January 3rd, 1992 by and between the City and the Authority.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Today, we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2024, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal year 2024 through fiscal year 2029. This morning, we will hear testimony from the Managing Director's Office and the Police Department. This afternoon, we will hear from the Department of Behavioral Health, Public Health, and the Office of Homeless Services. Mr. McDermott, the first person to testify today is?
First person to testify from the administration is Tumar Alexander, Managing Director.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning,
Thank you,
everyone.
John.
Good morning, Council President.
Thank you for being with us. Ian, please proceed.
Good morning, President Clark and members of City Council. I am Tumar Alexander, Managing Director. Joining me today are members of my senior staff and agency directors within the Managing Director's office, as well as Eva Gladstein, First Deputy Managing Director, Mike Carroll, Deputy Managing Director for Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability, Joshua Harris, Interim Senior Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety, Mary Horseman, Deputy Managing Director for Health and Human Services, Orlando Rendon, Deputy Managing Director for Community Services, and Dave Wilson, Deputy Managing Director for General Services, Arts and Events. I am pleased to provide testimony on the Managing Director's Fiscal Year 2024 operating budget. I am proud of the Managing Director's Office efforts over the last year. MDO departments and programs have worked tirelessly to address gun violence plaguing our neighborhoods, created a welcoming city for new arrivals, successfully won $179 million in new transportation infrastructure grants, and collaborated to help the city recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the next fiscal year, MDO will continue to step up and work towards our shared goals for a better city. Next fiscal year, we will expand our violence prevention programs, improve the quality of life in Philadelphia, making sure that every neighborhood has clean and safe streets, continue the historic investment in the city's parks, recreation centers, and libraries via the Rebuild program, scale tenant supports like rights of council to level the playing field and landlord-tenant court, deepen the citywide response to overdose epidemic, centering our work on the impacts on Black and Brown communities, invest in an equitable and affordable transportation system, and much, much more. Residents continue to confront the trauma of gun violence, the overdose epidemic, and poverty. Understanding the magnitude of these challenges, we stand committed to resolving them. I will now briefly highlight some of the recent accomplishments and key activities expected in the coming fiscal year. Expanding engagement to reduce violence. From issuing the first rounds of the community expansion grants, building a ready replication model, and launching Juvenile Assessment Center, we are expanding violence prevention services. Next fiscal year, MDO will invest $76 million in anti-violence funding to sustain and expand proven programs. Supporting our neighborhoods, from graffiti removal and vacant lots cleanup to providing work opportunities through same-day work and pay, CLIP continues to be of service to the community citywide. In 2022, CLIP cleaned thousands of lots throughout the city with a particular focus in areas of high violence. Next fiscal year, we will continue to grow the reach of CLIP to improve the cleanliness of the streets and neighborhoods. Rebuild is building stronger, more welcoming community spaces where Philadelphia residents can learn, play, and grow. Rebuild has now completed 14 sites with another 16 preparing for or currently under construction and 22 in community engagement and design process. Strengthening supports the tenants facing eviction. Health and Human Services continues to collaborate with planning and development to provide tenant supports to prevent eviction. In FY2023, HHS expanded rights of council to 2 additional zip codes, 19144 and 19134, for a total of 4 zip codes total. In the FY24 five-year plan, the city invests $29 million in eviction prevention, scaling right to council, and pilot in a mobile resource team to address self-help illegal evictions. Respond to the challenging nature of the overdose epidemic. Unintentional overdose in Philadelphia has historically been highest among non-Hispanic white individuals, but now we are seeing an increase in impact in Black and Brown communities. In response, the Opioid Reduction Unit is developing a comprehensive citywide engagement plan to prevent fatal overdoses, targeting outreach in North Philadelphia, expanding harm reduction services citywide, and launching mobile methadone clinics citywide. Invest in equitable transportation system. In 2022, Otis started the Infrastructure Solutions Team, which was developed to ensure that projects funded by the bipartisan infrastructure law bill wealth in Black and Brown communities in the city. In this fiscal year, Otis will continue to focus on equitable transportation system while launching a 2-year pilot of a zero fare transit program aimed at providing Philadelphians at or below the poverty line with a free SEPTA pass. This is just a sample of our work. We are committed to continuing to improve the performances of our operations and resolving our residents' most confronting challenges. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for your time and City Council's partnership as we tackle some of the city's most challenging issues. My colleagues and I are happy and ready to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Got a couple of questions before I turn it over to my colleagues. Let me start out with one that we've discussed for the last couple of years, the contribution to the comprehensive approach to dealing with violence in our communities, funding for community grants, the community expansion grant, and the targeted community investment grant. You're asking for $13 million to be allocated to these two programs. Can you give us a snapshot of the benefits and the performance based on the earlier grants that were given in the earlier fiscal years? Do we have a sense of some analysis on how they've actually performed and if we need to change the strategy or not, or just enhance in terms of resources the existing entities that are providing a service and expand those groups?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I'll start out and then I'll ask Joe Harris to jump in and kind of help me a little bit. First, I want to thank Council for that historic investment. And as you all witnessed and sort of went through with us as we took time to set up those programs and set up a structure to where we got a lot of that money, in particular the CEG program money, out on the street to what we call some of the smaller, more invested groups, the boots on the ground folks. So out of that program, I believe there was about 31 grantees. The first year we had, I'm sitting here and I'll acknowledge that we had challenges on starting that program up. One of the things we wanted to do was just not build a grant program that just sort of gave government or city money to folks, but didn't allow them the investments to sort of help them grow, help them with some of the back office function supports, help tie them to fiduciaries and other folks who supported this, and also have an evaluation process within this grant. So it took us a few months to get that program off the ground. That program, although it was created last year during the budget process, that program is sort of what I'm calling, I believe what I said, the 5-year plan spanning across fiscal years. So right now, those grantees have had an extension to be able to continue their programming throughout the remaining months of this fiscal year, but also into next fiscal year, so they can have a full year of implementation and operation. I will say, as a whole, I would say that program has been very successful in engagement and in recruiting participants to their programs. I think where we could do a little better at for the next cycle is trying to tie in some of that collective work, right, and tie it all in to make it be more of a citywide approach. So you have folks and grantees that's doing programs across the city in their various neighborhoods, but how are we being more deliberate in tying in and bringing them together and making sure that they are doing collaborative work, which we have seen, making sure they're doing more collaborative work, but making sure that we tie it in citywide to where it's this concept of making sure that we can see where these programs are citywide, how we're getting participants to them, and seeing in spaces that we may feel as though in neighborhoods we don't have enough of these programs or enough efforts, and how can we help build those and create those programs within those neighborhoods. I would say this year our strategy is rolling over, being able to have folks the current grantees apply for extensions of those grants if they want to do the same program, opening the program to other grantees who may not have been successful, or new people who want to apply for the grants, but also new existing grantees who may want to do different work or may want to do something different than which they applied for the first time, being able to have those folks have an opportunity to be able to apply. So I think in all, we expect this year, and I believe the grant program just opened yesterday for the extensions and for the new grantees. We expect through this fiscal year with current money to be able to award up to 50 grants. But as you know, we're in a budget cycle, so if we get more funding, we'll be able to increase those grants. But Joe Shu, I don't know if you want to jump in and add anything to the Council President's question.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. President and Council. A few things about the program as it's gone so far in its first year. CEG was designed to address an unmet need that was not being addressed by existing grants programs. If you're going for federal or state dollars, first of all, the grant makers are a lot less close to the community. And they're also tend to have some fairly onerous compliance requirements. That was when council advocated successfully to create the microgrants program, targeted community investment grants. It was designed to provide an entry point for organizations that were not, in many cases, going to be able to compete successfully for existing grants. But at the same time, there was a need, and there was, again, a call from council to fill in the middle between a microgrants program and some of the larger, more involved federal and state grants programs. And that's what CEG was designed to do, was to fill in that middle, to connect up between a microgrants program and a larger, full-fledged grants program. And so one of the things that we did at the same time that we're putting together a grants program is to also provide supports to these organizations to make sure that they were going to be able to develop and grow at the same time that they were implementing these grants. So there were funds set aside to do technical assistance and capacity building work for these organizations. And the hope is that we're going to see our organizations graduate, so to speak, from this program and go on to do bigger and better things and to really develop some serious sustainability. And so we do have an independent evaluator. We're expecting to have results from that evaluation later this spring, and we're expecting that we'll be able to utilize the insights from that evaluation to make some enhancements to the program as we come into round two. And the round two did just open yesterday. And so we're in the midst right now of that second iteration of the program, and we're looking forward to making CEG an even better, even more responsive program to the needs of the community.
Thank you. One of the issues, and you referenced Ms. Alexander earlier in your testimony, the support entity, because sometimes some of these applications or solicitations from the city of Philadelphia and any government entity can be somewhat onerous, overburdensome in terms of the paperwork. I think, didn't we hire some entity that helped organizations start that process? And
yeah, that's correct.
Who is that, and how successful have they been? Because I hear that about from these various organizations, how challenging it is to even get in the game, so to speak.
Yeah, Joe Shooter, you want to talk around the folks who we hired to be fiduciaries and provide the technical assistance support?
I confess I haven't been involved in this aspect of the program thus far with CEG. As you may know, I've been in this role for only a few months, so I would be happy to get some fuller information on that.
Yeah, I have it. I think the Scattered Goods Corporation was the folks that's providing the technical assistance, and I believe as it relates to the fiduciaries, the organizations was able to pick from a group of around maybe a half a dozen or so, and I could get a list to the council of the names of those organizations and the Scattered Goods information, Council President.
All right. Can you have the specific information forwarded to us without exposing any, proprietary information?
Yeah, no proprietary information. It's
we just want to get a sense of, how many people were actually seeking assistance and how successful they were, because we hear that.
One of the things we did, Council President, is we didn't let folks voluntarily take us up on that offer. We made it as a condition of the grants. So all of these folks went through the technical assistance part. And as you know, some groups may have been more advanced than others and may not have needed as much work as others, but all of these folks had to as a part of the grant, and will be the part of renewal, looking at how they participated in both the technical assistance piece of it and being open to the evaluation, because the evaluation wasn't just folks wanting to look at the program from a paper standpoint, but also wanting to visit these programs as the programming was happening. So it consisted of a bunch of field visits from these organizations to the organizations we were funding to see how the program was doing as well. We can provide that to the chair.
All right. And one last thing on this, and I'll turn over. I got a lot of other questions about a lot of other things. and I don't want to be accused of ageism, but how many of these organizations tend to be on the younger side that have received grants? Because a lot of, I mean, just being straight up, I mean, the ability to communicate with a lot of the individuals when we're looking at, according to police statistics, 14 to 24, 13 to 24 is the age range where we have real challenges. I guess I'm basically saying, are we getting younger individuals or younger organizations involved in these programs, the more peer groups of these individuals that find themselves in challenge?
I would say out of the mix of 31, out of the 31 grantees, is probably a mix of them. Certainly, there are some folks who've been established and been in this violence prevention space for a while. Not being ageist myself, some folks who've been in this space since I was running around in high school, right? But there's folks who are running programs who have staff and members of their leadership team or executive team that's also young people. There's young people, and I wish Erica was able to participate today, because she will talk about the group of folks who she mentor, who's like the I don't want to get in trouble for saying any names, so I'm gonna try to avoid that. But some of the young folks, that's the Pastor Carls of the world, or the folks that's running different programs who they kind of been building up to be able to take advantage of these grants. So I think, Council President, to your question, it's a mix. It's a mix of some older, more established folks doing this work, but also young people that's doing this work. And what we try to do is try to take them from a space of maybe those folks was applying for the TCIG program, which was some of the smaller grants, because their work may have been focused on a particular event or activity. But then how do you build up those groups that clearly have the ears to the street and clearly have those relationships with those young people, right? And are influential, I would say, with those young people. How do you build them up to be able to participate in that CEG, be able to participate in the CEG piece? So that's on our minds all the time. And it's funny because I was getting briefed on one of our programs, and one of the things I asked is some folks went out to Chicago for the READY program, and one of the organizations we're working with, I'm very familiar with that organization. I just asked the people that participated, was like, well, how many young people, like, did they take some young people on their staff? Like, did they have some folks in their 20s? Because this, you know from experience, and most of the members on the call and others know, these young people we're dealing with now, they're old heads per se. Where it was my generation, we listened to the generation that was, 5-10 years ahead of us. Now these folks are listening to folks like 1, 2, 3, 4 years ahead of them. So we got to make sure we have that right credible message that's reaching this crowd, and that is an important part of this work.
All right, yeah, and I can get away with asking that question given my age, but there's a certain reality that, I mean, you need younger people, and I'm glad to see that you all are moving in that direction to encourage and get younger individuals, more peer groups to participate in this program. All right, thank you. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gautier.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning, Managing Director. I am very concerned about young people and their involvement in gun violence, as I know that other people, many of us on council, are. So I wanted to ask you a few questions about our efforts to deal with that issue. During the mayor's budget hearing, we learned about a new effort for young people that will be a collaboration between the Office of Children and Families and PPD. And from what I gathered in listening to the testimony, the program will aim to do some predictive analysis, trying to, identify maybe young people at risk and then match that with remediating resources and programs. So I wanted to ask some more questions about that new effort. First, can you share how you will collect, analyze, and share data about the young people who will be involved in the program, and also what data you're collecting? And can you or someone from your team talk about what kind of resources would be provided to the young people?
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman. As this is something that OCF is leading, I'm gonna ask Deputy Managing Director Mary Horstman to get in and talk a little bit about it. But I think more of a robust conversation will be for the OCF hearing, and when Vanessa and her team come to do the presentation.
Thank you.
You're gonna Good morning. I'm Mary Horseman, Deputy Managing Director for Health and Human Services. So thank you so much for the question, Council Member. This is something we're looking at, particularly as we're heading into the summer, and we're going to do a lot of new programming for youth, and we want to understand the impact of that. So we are working with an outside evaluator to look at who's being targeted by these programs, and are they individuals who we see as higher risk, and making sure we're getting the resources we need. And then understanding the impact of those activities. So are they getting more engaged? Are we seeing them participating at certain levels? And then understanding which programs are really effectively meeting the needs that we're seeking to address, both from the activity side of things, the connections to caring adults, as well as meeting basic needs for the youth.
Thank you. And I can wait for OCF, but if you can you talk about what we would be looking at to determine whether young people are at risk, and the types of interventions that we would be looking to connect them to, and also are these interventions and programs that we already have, or are these programs that we would need to create?
So most of these programs we already have, so it's really about providing more opportunities. So we know things that are helping to provide protective factors to youth. So that's, active engagement on activities they care about. So whether that's, creative endeavors or sports activities or pursuing academics and making sure that they have a venue for that. That we know that adult mentorship and near-peer mentorship is really key. So being able to connect with adults who are caring, who will help them work through challenges, who will help them think through if they're experiencing something that they're struggling with, help them de-escalate that situation and be able to advise them and give them good advice. And that'll come in a lot of different contexts. So whether that's a sports program or hanging out at the pool, thinking about those different kinds of activities, whether it's something they do every day, whether so it could be a camp, or it could be a drop-in activity that they do a couple times a week. So we want to make sure we have the variety and the number of slots available so that all the kids who are seeking services can be able to access them, as well as kids who might be on the fence about seeking services. We can pull in and recruit them because they're excited. They're seeing their friends participate in those activities and they can join them.
Okay. And can you talk about how we'll identify young people at risk? Because I too have this concern. I think youth development in and of itself is a great thing, but I often question whether we are reaching the most at-risk young people and able to sort of redirect them and set them on a different path. So how will we be making that determination?
So we know that there's a couple of ways that people tend to be identified as highly at risk. So certainly if they've been involved in the juvenile justice system or they have had low attendance at school, that's some of the things that we see as really putting them in higher risk factors. And those are among the populations that we're going to focus on for the summer.
Thank you. And how far away are we from setting up this initiative and being ready for the summer?
We are very close. So we are going to be doing summer kickoff shortly. And so we're working with providers right now to make sure we have slots available for youth this summer.
Great. I look forward to learning more, at the OCF hearing. Can you, Managing Director, or anyone else on your team share what other programs targeting youth will be operated out of CJPS, either individually or as a part of other existing programs that target youth involved in gun violence?
Yeah, I think in addition to what the work Mary just spoke about and the work with LCF, I mean, about our traditional programs. Our GVI program, our READY program is just, I won't use the word ready to launch, but we are actively ready and prepared to be able to go do outreach for participants for that. And then we talked about, making sure that we are actively seeking to connect some young people who may not be gang related, so they don't meet the GVI criteria, may not meet the READY criteria, but be able to match them to some of the grantees, whether that's the CEG grantees or to the the TCIG grantee programs. But I think one of the things that we talked about just really internally last week, and actually want to do it as a partnership with the mayor's office and with council, is just having a citywide resource fair for all of the programs that we are funding, all of the programs that we know are out there that's existing. Having a sort of one-day event at a really big place somewhere in the city on a Saturday where parents and young people could come, whether they're looking for a summer job, whether they want to get their summer work program, get their work papers done, whether they want to connect to a sports league, a volunteer league, one of the grantees, like just having all of that at one space for people to see resources and people to sort of know this is all of the things that's available to them. One of the things that, just pain me as I see some of the activities with young people who, whether it was the activity downtown last week or in South Philly at the carnival, is that we need to do a better job of letting parents know what's available for them, right? And making it easy to access for them. Because I think, sometimes you all fund these programs, we all put these programs together, but I think sometimes it will behoove us to think about what's the easiest way to get this stuff and get this information to parents who may not read a newspaper, may not watch us on Channel 64, right? May not read or see everything the mayor says in a speech about these different things. What's the easiest way? It may not want to connect to 211, but what's the easiest way we can reach them for them to get access for resources for their teenagers and for their young people? Because there's a lot of good programs out here. There's a lot of programs that are doing great work with young people. NOMO just did something on Sunday where they did a free concert where I've seen pictures of parents and kids filled at the Met, enjoying themselves on Easter Sundays. That's stuff that we all did as young people, right? And we as a city need to do a better job of funding those programs, but we also need to do a better job of getting it out there and let parents know these programs exist. So that's the work we hope to continue to do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I have to confess that I'm confused by so many people being confused about what's going on with young people. I think if we can't affirmatively say that we can connect young people with opportunity and fun and support, then we're going to continue to see what we saw in Center City this past week. And so I look forward to continuing this conversation about how we prepare for the summer so that we can have a different dynamic. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Good morning, Mr. President, and good morning, Mr. Alexander.
Sir.
I am truly thankful about the elevation of the gun violence and youth advocacy elevation in the discussions here in the budget hearings. I remember annually, President will read back the tapes. We used to say if 300 whales washed up on the shore of the Schuylkill, every marine biologist, including Jacques Cousteau himself, would come to examine it. Until Kathy Gilmore Richardson actually sent me an article about whales washing up on the shore. So I want to thank you and my colleagues for elevating this issue to front and center. It is the first issue you mentioned in your testimony. So thank you for that. I won't ask the questions that were asked before, similar to what President Clark talked about. But what I will do is ask, how are we evaluating legacy organizations that are supposed to be providing similar services, interventions that some of the grassroots newer organizations are providing? How are we evaluating them who have may have the same contract for decades and yet have not achieved the results that should be achieved? And I'm talking about not to single one out, but if you think about what the contract is with JEVS, and Ms. Figueroa is bold new leadership for that organization, but how are we comparing apples to apples evaluation to see how we might want to offer some changes, to do something different, to change the outcomes that we've grown overly accustomed to? And the second part, so I can get my question out, is we saw 200 young people running the streets of Philadelphia, jumping on police cars. I am a firm believer similar to what Member Gutierrez said, we should provide the right hand of fellowship for young people, give them pathways out of mediocrity and juvenile bad outcomes. However, we also have to make sure we save them from themselves. And I want to know, are we ready for this summer by way of police recruitment and deployment to deal with, as the temperatures rise, so does the activity?
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. Let me start with your last part of your question because it's fresher on my mind, but I wrote down the first part. And the first part, it's a little more complicated because some of those organizations you mentioned, a lot of them get legacy contracts from places different than MDO. So a lot of those legacy contracts are on the prevention side coming out of the Department of Human Services. But to the latter part of your questions, are we prepared? I think we are in the process of getting prepared. Our reaction to that incident in Center City was pretty swift, and we were able to contain it and be able to make sure those folks got dispersed home with very minimum, I will say, need for arrest. But it wasn't. But it was at the same time it was a concise and forceful response, right? I would say we are prepared. We are prepared for those type of activities. But I don't want and I agree with you. I absolutely understand that we need to have a right hand and a left hand in this situation. And parents need to be aware of what their young people are doing and what times they are doing it and where they are, right? Because to me, those, what I saw, I'm just going to tell you what I saw, right? And I'm just saying what I saw as Tumor Alexander was young people who was intent on meeting up and doing something that maybe to them is fun. To us, in my time, I would meet up down the gallery or the fashion district, what is now called the fashion district, but we would go there to see other people from different parts of the city, maybe spend the $5 or $10 that my mom gave me, maybe not. But it was the same thing. It was about seeing other young people. It wasn't about running around destroying police property or running around being menacing on the streets or doing doing some of those type of activities. But I believe, and if my belief is wrong, it's wrong. I believe those aren't the same kids that's in our neighborhoods carrying guns and causing some of the gun violence, right? So it's, for me, what kind of prevention and intervention could you give to those young people there who are screaming at us saying maybe they need something to do. Maybe they don't like what we have for them to do, right? Maybe they don't see our rec centers as a resource because they don't know the type of programming that's there. Maybe they don't see NOMO or, Culture Changing Christians or Treehouse or any of those programs or the Lighthouse, any of those programs we funded. Maybe their parents need to know we have some really cool activities that's available for you that you could do, where you could be a young person, you could be expressive, you could do the things and have a little fun without being rebellious and causing this havoc, right? I think social media plays a big part in this, and how these things take place and how these things happen and the reason for why some of these kids do some of these things. But I think we're prepared. I know it was folks that police had come up a little later. It was folks calling for curfews lower curfews in certain areas. If you look at the time that particular situation happened at a time where those young people, by and large, were allowed to be out at around that time, right? So I think we got to do a better job as city government on advertising the need for where these programs are, being able to make these programs enticing, especially to teens. We've been having that conversation with you all for a while, right around. We have great rec centers, great playgrounds, great libraries for young people. Young people take advantage of them. But what are we doing to capture that teen group that, for whatever reason, it's not cool for them to hang out in the library? How do we make it cool, right? Parks and Rec had its programs where they're trying to do this esports centers in some of their facilities. I think that's a part of it. I think we got to do more things like that to figure out what are you into, what do you like, how can we put that program in a safe space when you're in a safe atmosphere. But that, I'm also not going to pretend that even if we do all of that, there will still be some kids intent on, for whatever reason, whatever clout chasing that they're doing, that they will go out and want to do those activities. We have to be prepared for it. Police is coming up. They could talk a little bit more about their recruitment efforts. Certainly, you all have just given us some resources to increase those efforts around advertising in particular. That just came out of the mid-year transfer ordinance. But as you talk about, Councilman, to get to your first part of your question, and I am going to piggyback a little bit on Vanessa Garrett Harley and her team's hearing that's coming up around how do we look at the funding that those legacy organizations on the prevention side get, and how do we grow? So I'm not looking at it as a either or, I'm looking at it as an and, because I want to know how do we grow these organizations that we're funding on the CEG side? How do we grow them to become those legacy organizations that's being able to access some of that same amount of funding on the prevention and the intervention side? And that's why it's important for us, as we just not, here's a grant, take the grant, go do the great work that you're doing, but let us help your back office function. Let us give you the technical assistance, because some of these grants and some of these activities, we want you to be able to, when you have money, you're able to attract more money, right, as an organization. So we want you to be able to say, I have a City of Philadelphia CEG grant. I'm going to now go after this PCCD grant. I'm going to now go after this federal grant. I'm going to now go to philanthropy, which should be playing a big part in this, to go after some funding. So it's how do we build them up to that same status? But I think the folks from DHS and OCF could talk a little bit in their hearing about how are they dealing with the legacy organizations that they're funding. But at the same time, they are doing a job in helping us fund some of these organizations. I think you will see folks who receive a CEG grant from us also receiving some prevention money from DHS, may also for the first time be receiving some workforce work ready money, whether that's Philly Works or through other organizations. But how do you then present those folks to be able to access that funding is a big part of some of the work we're going to try to do.
So I appreciate your response. One of the things I'm thankful for, you met with one of the group's providers, and they were non-traditional. They did not have a great back office operation, but what they could do that none of us that I know of could do was walk into public housing, walk into a gang violence area, and be able to put things on freeze and say, don't you move, don't you move. Anybody gets hurt, we're holding both of you responsible. I can't walk in those crowds anymore. President Clark can't do it, but they did. If we match them up with some of the legacy groups to provide that back office operation to bring them up to scale, maybe we can really have an impact on what's going on the streets. So those measurements, if it ain't measured, it ain't managed. But if people that have legacy contracts can't figure out the difference between Washington Avenue and Washington Lane, maybe it's time for them to get educated by, like President Clark said, by the younger groups. And I remember Cindy Bass, and I'll close on this, arguing debating with the district attorney about that right hand versus that left hand approach to dealing with the crime situation. Harity was also passionately talking about that. So our members want to do not or, but we do want to do and. Thank you, Mr. President.
The thing is, that's a good
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Next up for questions, Councilmember Thomas.
There we go. Good morning. Sorry about that technical issue. Good morning, Managing Director Alexander. It's always good to see you. Thank you for all you do, sir.
Sir. Thank you.
I wanted to discuss a couple things on my first round. I'm going to try to get everything in. It depends on how long your answers are. So for me, it's interesting to hear us talk about prevention-based initiatives for young people. Last year, I was like screaming at the top of my lungs about this, and everybody acted like I was crazy. I've been asking for money for freedom schools since I've been a member of City Council. We gave $100,000 to the Center for Black Male Educators who provide freedom school sites for K-2. But, since 2019, I've asked for $1 million for freedom schools. I've said multiple times, if we put one freedom school in every councilmatic district, we'll see a huge difference as it relates to how teens are engaged in the program. And yet there's been no money for that. And I know that's not necessarily a managing director's office thing. But anytime I get an opportunity to advocate for things that I know that work, especially for teenagers, I'm going to go ahead and do that. What is a managing director's office thing is what we did last year for Philly Hoops Month. actually working with you, Managing Director Alexander, we were able to get $100,000 for prevention-based initiatives for the summer of 2023. And while I'm happy about that, my concern is, as a person who ran summer programs for years and still does a free camp every summer, I'll have 300 kids in my camp this summer. The dollars that's needed for summer programming can't come out of this year's budget, right? That's not realistic. So if we know that we're dealing with issues with our teenagers, and we know we cannot put money out of this year's budget to organizations in time for them to have an impact on the summertime, from your expert opinion, do you think we are prepared for when the weather breaks? And, like you said, we all Philly folks. We know that when the weather breaks, we're more inclined to see young people participate in the negative activity. Have we allocated enough money from transfer ordinances in the fall and from previous dollars already granted? Because this year's budget won't help with this summer. So do you think we're prepared as it relates to our spending and the number of free programs and free services that are out there? Because I don't think we are. That's just my opinion. And I've been meeting with summer providers, and, I was even at Virtual Community yesterday, which has a culinary program with Saw High School. And Saw High School, they're doing an amazing job over there. But the culinary program, like many other folks who I've talked to already, are asking for money for the summer. So, how can we, and I guess I'm answering my own question by saying it's not enough money, how can we get access to more funds and resources that people can use to prepare for free programming this summer?
Yeah, I thank you, Councilman. And I'm going to be as short-winded as possible and not dominate the questions. And I apologize if I was long-winded at some other answers. But I think the key is, are we prepared? Yes. Are we concerned? Am I concerned? Or are the leaders on this call concerned about summer activities, about when the weather gets warmer? Absolutely. I remarked going home one day, I was riding by, it was one of the warm days last week, and every playground and park I rode by was bustling with kids and folks. And I said to the person I was with, I can't even be really happy about it because I'm concerned, like, what's going to happen, right? So, we talked to police and to the commissioner and her team about making sure that we were doing expanded patrols around all of our recreation spaces, just to make sure the cops are aware of what's going on. We know the weather's good. We know folks are going to use it, and for folks to see that sense of safety by seeing folks that they know cops are paying attention and folks are paying attention to what's going on. So that's A. B is, I don't think we could ever have enough money to be able to fund each and every good program that's out here that's doing work for people. But I think as a part of this process, and I don't want to downplay the historic investment you guys pushed us to do a few years ago on the violence prevention side of that we keep doing. That was an enormous hit.
I like to think that most of that money went to intervention-based initiatives.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I just
absolutely.
think the difference, because the prevention-based initiatives is what I've been screaming about. And, I think we need to allocate. I think we need to find a way to set aside a pot of money to deal with emergency situations this summer. I think we need to find a way to be able to, I was meeting the other day with some of our school district folks as well as SEPTA police and the police department, and we were talking about safe travel for young people to and from school. Mm-hmm. And the things that Chief Officer Bethel talked about was the safe corridor staff that he had and the fact that he can't hire up until September. So I'm saying, like, if we were to say, okay, well, let's make some funds available for him to be able to hire up now, because we know the weather is about to break and we know the likelihood of somebody, being involved in some type of altercation increases significantly. I'm going to just keep pushing that. Let me just say this too before my time runs out. We're talking about making things readily available for young people. I had some issues as it relates to how we're dealing with HR stuff, right? Like, we know 1 out of every 5 jobs right now currently is not filled. I'm wondering, similar to what I talked about with pushing these jobs that are available as it relates to government jobs, I'm wondering, can we make information available to young people? I love the idea of a fair at a big place, resource fair, telling young people what options they have for the summer. But what about meeting them where they are on their phones? What does it look like for us as a city to pay for digital advertisement so that this information could be right there? When they go on TikTok, when they go on YouTube, they see All they got to do is click on something to find the resources that's available, in the city of Philadelphia for them, similar to what I recommended as it relates to the hiring crisis that we're dealing with. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a good idea, council member, because we just, as I was walking into the office today, I ran into our HR director, Mike Zaccagni, and he was talking about preparing to come up with a plan for utilizing some of the money you all just granted him in the mid-year around advertisement for public safety jobs. But you're right. We got to meet people where they are. Folks folks watch TV a whole different way than we watch TV in the past, right? And the key to this stuff is being accessible to the item that we have right in our hands, probably 23 hours a day, or wearing a smartwatch or whatever. So I agree with you, and I think you will see us do a little more attention or a little more effort on how we're doing social media advertisement, how we're doing advertisement that's sort of reaching folks in a direct way of where they work. I mean, we all get this, and we're in the season to get this stuff, right? But I'm sure you all on text messages where you'll get certain center, and I get it even from folks in Wisconsin that text message me, hey, Tumar, this is Senator X, and I need you to do X, Y, and Z. Well, how do we we should be able to do the same type of programming and put on there to say, hey, Tumar, this is, here's jobs that's available for you, young person, right? And here's the way to be, here's the link to be able to access it. I do think there is more intentionality of a partnership with our OHR, working with the school district and with the charter schools directly. So you see a lot of charter schools now and a lot of schools that's doing this end of the year sort of fair thing. So they acknowledge it, like they've got a group of kids that's graduate to go to college, but they also got a group of kids that's going to graduate and not go to college. Right. So what type of jobs, city jobs in particular, that they have access to coming right out of high school, right? So I believe OHR could be able to talk about that. I think they come up tomorrow, but they'll be able to talk about that. I know they're doing a big one with the Mastery charter schools. Mastery's doing a big job fair, or what they call it a resource fair as well, to how to connect kids from 12th grade right into jobs, how to connect kids who recently graduated right into some entry-level city jobs. And one of the things I tell folks about city job, the job you come in with don't need to be the job you retire out of, right? So you get in whatever way you get in, whatever job opportunity you get in, but you never stop looking to grow and to move and advance to different departments and enhance your career. And that's something that we got to do more of, but that's something we got to be intentional on grabbing folks right now, right? Grabbing folks where we could get them and meeting them where they are and connecting them to that. Because we're not going to hire our way out of this vacancy crisis as it relates to employment, because it's not just stuff that's affecting government. Every restaurant I go to now, the first thing they ask me is, you have any young people that want to work? We need dishwashers. We need cooks. We need this. We need that. Everybody's looking for employees. So how are we being intentional and connecting these folks to these jobs and resources?
It's the era of the great resignation. My time is up. Thank you for all of your answers, and looking forward to continuing working together. I got to come back for a second round because I have a few more questions about some things I've advocated for in the past. So
yes,
thank you, Thank you, colleagues, for your patience.
You guys can kind of read through
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sumar, good to see you. As always, continue to keep up the good work. Just a couple questions. So, I'm going to be advocating in the key areas, a couple key areas under what I call a Save Our Youth initiative, and specifically some budget requests I'm going to be looking to advocate for as it relates to supporting our young people. And one particular area is around the Safe Path, Safe Corridors program under Town Watch. Now, I see that you're going to be doubling the staff, and so I wanted to know how much staff will you be doubling the Town Watch Integrated Services Training Program? Is it in partnership with the Philadelphia School District? Will it also be targeted where there's high crime areas in terms of zip codes for those schools? And then also, can you give me an idea under the Office of Victims Advocate? There's a new relocation specialist position. If someone can give us an overview on what that relocation specialist responsibilities are going to be. I saw that the funding for victim services, support services was, it was $500,000 last budget cycle. This year is $200,000. So I just want to get an idea around that particular cut. And that's pretty much it at this moment.
Thank you, council member. Let me call it up in reverse order. I'm going to ask Derek Holmes to come up and talk a little bit about relocation and what that specialist we're looking for. the job search, and then I'll talk a little bit and let, Director Anthony Murphy come up and talk a little bit about his expansion.
Yeah, Tumar, let me back up too. Under the Managing Director's office, just want to give a shout out to, again, Mr. Anthony Murphy. Every time there's a homicide in South Philadelphia or Southwest throughout my district, he's always sending out a team to go door to door with me. And also, I want to give a shout out to Adara Combs and her team as well. Every time we're dealing with issues around someone losing their life, so a homicide or a shooting, if we need information, have no problem reaching out to her, as well as Mr. Joshua Harris, inside the Office of Violence Prevention, just keeping us aware of the policies and procedures that are coming out of their particular offices as it relates to us addressing the issue of youth gun violence. So I just wanted to make sure I give your team their proper due in terms of the work that they're doing on the ground. This is hard work, and I just want to acknowledge them for being on top of it.
Thank you, Councilmember. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your work, especially around the Victims Advocate Office. It was something that was much needed, and we're happy it's up and running, and we look forward to growing it. But let me call up Adara, and then I'll call up Murphy.
Good morning, council members. Good morning, Council President. And thank you for that question, Councilmember Johnson. The question as it pertains to the relocation specialist position specifically, I'll get to that, but I just want to speak to the relocation program first as a whole. So as it stands, we're still developing the relocation program, but I just want to be clear that as that happens, we are still working diligently in partnership with the Office of Violence Prevention and with our other stakeholders, such as PAN, to ensure that those that come to us in need of relocation services are still serviced. Even last week, without hiring a relocation specialist, we received word from a community member that there was a need for a relocation, and we are actively working to ensure that that community member is moved to safety. So I just want to be clear about that, so there's no misunderstanding that as we continue to build this program and look for a viable candidate, that we are not standing still as our community is in need. Moving on to the actual position itself, we are actively and diligently seeking a relocation coordinator, is the change in title. We have gone through many interviews. We are still interviewing for that position, but basically the vision for that role is that they would be the referral point person internally for those in need of relocation, meaning that if, let's say, one of you city council members has a community member within your district who is in need of services, they could contact that relocation coordinator. That person would then not only be able to assist them in terms of the resources that we have available, but if there are other resources available within the city, let's say through the district attorney's office, let's say they're more appropriate for that, we would be able to work in partnership with them. Using that same example the other way, if the district attorney's office had a community member that was in need of relocation that didn't fit within their portfolio or their limitations, they would be able to refer to that relocation coordinator as well. That person would then take a holistic approach in assessing what the need is, and then making sure that those needs are met. And that can look a lot of different ways. I think there are a lot of, not necessarily within this body, but just within our community, a lot of misunderstandings in terms of what relocation means. That can go anywhere from needing to be placed within a hotel temporarily, to needing funds to actually move, to needing a deposit for a viable housing resource that's already identified. So assessing what is actually needed, not what we assume is needed, and making sure that those needs are met, and seeing them through. So within that kind of overview of what the position entails, and again, also keeping in mind that we are actively still doing this work without a dedicated staff member, we've looked into ensuring that when community members come to us, we already have resources kind of set aside, as opposed to just trying to figure it out case by case. And what that looks like is trying to find housing, emergency housing, in the form of hotel contracts that we're already working on, in the form of potential leasing opportunities, so that way we have secure housing, contracting with moving companies, so on and so forth, that we're currently drafting an RFP for. So we already have things in place. So when they come to us, we're not figuring it out with them on a grand scale, but rather figuring out their particular circumstance and making sure that we're addressing that need. So I hope that answered your question, Councilmember Johnson. Yes.
Yes, and just for the record, just clarify for the members who are on this call, because I remember there was a big hearing sponsored by former Councilman David O regarding funding for individuals for relocation, individuals whose lives may be in danger. Just clarify the type of individuals. Just clarify for the record the type. Just clarify for the record the type of individuals that may come to the office to utilize this service. And then also, I just want to get clarity real quick on the $500 contract from the last budget cycle for victim relocation support services were eliminated in this budget, as well as the $500,000 for victim services went from $500,000 last year to only over $200,000 this year. So I'm kind of getting clarity on if we're in a state of emergency when it comes to gun violence, and we've seen 500 plus homicides last year, which are 500 families who have been significantly impacted, trying to get an understanding as to why aren't we increasing the level of support from a funding standpoint as opposed to digressing in terms of the type of funding that we're providing in those two particular areas, in case I missed something.
Okay. So to make sure that I understand your question correctly, the first portion of your question, in terms of the funds that were already allocated for relocation services, is the question, how's that funding being utilized, or is that the correct question? I just want to make sure I understand.
No, the correct question is, according to my notes, right, last year it was $500,000 specifically for victim support services through the Office of Victim Advocate, which this year is only allotted a little over $200,000. So there was a reduction from $500K to $200K for victim support services. So that's the first part, why we go from 500 to 200. And then the second part of that question is, there was a $500,000 contract for victim relocation support services, which are eliminated in this particular budget. So I'm trying to get an understanding where that 500 for victim relocation support services.
Hey, Darren, I'll take the first part of the question because that's more so around the funding for the office. So, council member, I think you'll see level funding for the office. So it's not any increase. As a matter of fact, we're growing that office because we're continuing to hire folks. But I think what you've seen with some of that was the startup costs, whether that was space, of certainly staffing, but that stays level across the budget. And then you also see an increase as it relates to as we're bringing on more people. Derek could talk a little bit around the funding that we received through, I believe, one of the transfer ordinances around witness relocation. But that funding was also intentional about not only managing directors sort of coordinating those efforts, but some of that funding was also going to some of the partners, some of the community partners that's doing some of this work and who we use to do this work, or who we use to get references from around some of these folks who need these services. And I know there is also some effort that Adara and her folks were doing with engaging the district attorney's office to help support some of that work from CARES and help support some of that work for CARES, because one of the things you see on witness relocation pieces, the funding the district attorney gets is really intentional about how to use that. So, person is a witness in a certain crime, willing to testify. I think the attention on the money you all gave us, and certainly the attention we've been working with, there's other folks who may not fall in that bucket, but who may be just as much in need of those services. So whether that's us contacting with PAN and others to sort of relocate folks who, for instance, may not be willing to be a witness, but I got to get this family out of that situation immediately, so nothing else no retaliatory thing happens. So that's a different bucket, and I think we both could coexist as serving those folks. There's certainly probably could be a need for more money on both of those buckets in terms of folks, and we'll take the budget as it's presented to us and be able to spend up to the amount that we have.
Okay, thank you.
And on the Town Watch question, I'm sorry, we ran a little bit out of time. So the Town Watch questions, we're adding 3 new community liaisons to help support that work that Murphy's doing around Safe Corridor. So maybe on another round, we can have Murphy pop up and talk about that work that he's doing with the school district and what neighborhoods they're doing that work in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. That's all I have.
information.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Phillips?
Thank you, Chairman Squella. We appreciate you. For me, this topic of youth prevention programming is incredibly important to me. Because what we know is that the research shows that when young people have a caring and loving adult in their life, it makes a world of a difference in terms of their trajectory. And so for me, my questions stem based or stem from this understanding. I just want to understand, like, for all of the violence prevention programs that are in the city of Philadelphia that we're funding, have we worked on developing a serious metric system to really have a better understanding of whether or not these programs are, number one, identifying the students that need to be in these programs. I heard, a conversation about this earlier, but are we actually identifying the students that absolutely need to be in these programs? Now, I firmly believe every child needs a youth program. Don't get me wrong. I think that's something that's really important. But then there's children who do have chronic absences, do have chronic behavioral issues in schools, and we need to make sure that they are in it. What are we doing to make sure that happens? And then also in terms of metrics, are we measuring with the funding for these agencies are receiving what type of quality results are coming? Are they becoming better leaders? Are they becoming more academically sound? Are they gaining more experiences that they've never seen before as a result of, because as a result of the program? What are some of the metrics that we have here in place, or is that something that needs to be built upon?
Thanks, Council Member. I'm going to kick it over to Mary Horseman, my Deputy Managing Director for Health and Human Services, to talk a little bit about it. But I do want to, before she jumps on, I do want to say there is, there's prevention programs, and a lot of them don't sit or rest within MDO. And there's also intervention programs. So, part of it is, I believe, like you said, every child needs to be in a program. I think the key is figuring out what program folks need to be in, and being able to fit them in the right program, and also fit them in a program that's going to be as helpful, right? So a lot of the stuff we've been funding through violence prevention, I think for the most part, while some of those providers may also do prevention work, a lot of it is intervention. Okay. Some of it will be in a bucket of prevention because, some of it will be in a bucket of prevention, but a lot of it is around how are we reaching some of the hardest to reach young people, and try to, in an ideal way, try to get to them before they commit any sort of crime or get into gun violence, or how are we protecting them from that? But then sort of how are we reaching folks who are also maybe in that life, and how are we trying to help them turn their life around to get out of those programs and projects? But I'll let Mary talk about some of the metrics and the data that we use. And Joe Shue referenced earlier around the evaluations, in particular around the CEG program, and how a little bit later in the spring, we'll be having those evaluations up from this first year cohort on how we think those programs have worked and the folks that they've served. But I'll turn it over to Mary.
Thank you, Tumar. And Councilmember, thank you so much for your question. I think as Tumar spoke to, we are collaborating with the Office of Children and Families to make sure there's positive engagement for youth this summer. So in addition to the summer out of school time, Work Ready, the rec center programming led by Children and Families, MDO is spearheading a key initiatives, really, as Tumar spoke to, is focused on intervention. So that means expanding community crisis intervention to mediate neighborhood disputes. And so we have a goal of reducing conflicts among individuals most likely to commit violence by increasing the number of home visits. So we've seen through the evaluation of that program that home visits are an essential element of that program and have measurable impact on de-escalation, and so being able to expand that element will help contribute to de-escalation citywide. This, and as Managing Director spoke to, likewise, we just got our evaluation on the group violence intervention program, and we saw a 30% reduction in gun violence activities for people who were involved in the program and connected to services. So we're going to also expand that program this summer. And again, this will be targeted at those who are most likely to being involved in gun violence. At the same time, we are doing another round of the targeted community investment grants, which again is paired with an evaluation strategy. So we are going to be doing those smaller dollar grants to grassroots organizations to do mentorship, job readiness, career development, vocational training, educational workshops, trauma supports, and then other activities like films, music production, fitness, community cleanups. We're also going to be doing more of our community outreach. So we're doing 20 sessions this summer of pop-up events focused on partnerships and youth activities. So criminal justice public safety is utilizing second Saturdays to spotlight youth leader community-based organizations and bring awareness. So there's a series this summer from June to September that we can share with you. But what I think you can hear from this is, I think there is an approach to the prevention side, thinking about, as we spoke about, individuals who are more at risk, whether they've been involved in the juvenile justice system, whether they have low attendance at school that we want to target, but also thinking about the programs that we've evaluated and learned from those and continue to evaluate that. So we will also be having the results of our community expansion grant evaluation. So depending on the program, the metrics will look different. And it's because the tools are different. So we can give you more detail. We can provide to the chair more detail look at what the specific outputs and outcomes we look to review through our evaluations, but it's specific to the programs that we deploy.
Thank you. Just also want to get a better understanding of how are we reaching these students that need to that we would like to have participate in these programs, because one of the things that I've been greatly concerned about is how do you are we knocking on doors? Are we making sure that parents are greatly aware of these particular programs and resources for our young people? One of the things I'm hoping that we can even add to our budget is something that we do where we have like foot soldiers, where people are willing to kind of put resources in people's doors, mailers, whatever that may be, to make sure that folks know about this. And then specifically working with our schools where our principals know who our children are that really need this. I'm finishing up. Making sure that those kids are heavily influenced to join these programs is really important. And then so that's where I'm really trying to get at, because I just think these programs are important, and we just got to make sure, because what happened the other day in the city was unacceptable, and we got to find a way to kind of address young people not having anything to do. And that's just something important, and have people that's going to be around them.
I agree, Councilmember. And I think just to answer the last part of your question, I think most of these programs probably do use a bunch of different methods for how they recruit their participants and young students. So I'm not sure if folks are doing door to door. I know some of their outreaches do social media, just because I'm on it and I kind of see it a lot with some of our programs. I know some of our programs go out to actual corners and try to entice folks, that give them word about the program, but then try to entice them to be participants in the program. He was going so far as to doing stipends for for young people that will join these programs. So I think it's various ways we could do it, but we could, as we talked about with Councilmember Thomas, we could certainly look at different ways of helping to support that work. Because I just think there is, kind of the no wrong door method, right? Wherever you get in at, we should be having folks that be knowledgeable, have information about all of the programs that's out there. And I think we could also do a more robust job on also publicizing the 211 hotline. The council was really instrumental in helping us fund and get up and started, and having them reach, having that be a resource where folks are calling or going to. But they've done some social media advertising. We've certainly put it in I think we believe we did it in the water bill to every resident to sort of let that be known. We've been trying to add that tagline to a lot of the things we put out, whether it's germane to violence or not. It's coming from the city, just so folks know that's a resource to use. That's a resource we could build up. So we could continue using all of those methods for how we do outreach to get folks to know the programs that's going on the intervention side, but then also being intentional on the prevention side of tying that in. And certainly your thought around engaging with the schools. would be something that we should already be doing. But if not, we should be doing to kind of help them identify. When they identify those folks to us sort of taking those methods and being able to get those young people in the program, like Community Crisis Intervention Program. And I'll be real brief because I know you ran out of time. Community Crisis Intervention Program, a component of that is trying to connect. They do work with schools. They respond to incidents that happen in and around schools, but also having them connect those folks back to those youth organizations for kind of referrals as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Managing Director.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Harity.
Hey, Tumar, how are you?
Morning,
Council
sir.
members, how are you? I only got a couple quick questions. Has to do with the salaries. I'm just trying to figure this out here. I'm looking at where the average exempt staff employee makes $68,000. The average minority makes $63,902, and the average white makes $76,756, and female $73,793. Why is there such a discrepancy in the pay of minorities for our exempt employees that doesn't actually even match up to the average of an exempt employee? I'm just trying to understand this.
Absolutely. And let me try to help you understand that. I think one of the things which we are a little unique with is that, our CLIP program, our Community Life Improvement Program, also runs out of the Manager Director's Office. So we really run the gamut, right? So on the low end, we have laborers, right? And on the high end, we got, I don't want to say folks like me, but on the high end, we got the execs, the deputy manager directors and those folks. So that's why that discrepancy with us may look different than each and every other department. One of the things we've tried to be really intentional about, especially with the raise review process that the mayor's office have sort of instituted around, I want to say around maybe 18 months ago, we've been really consistent on trying to raise up that lower salary base to make sure we're giving these folks a living wage. So I believe the CLIP program and probably the laborers, the crew chiefs, and we have some other folks who are some clerks and some other folks who are on that lower pay scale, to which through each of these processes, and I believe it's been 3 within those 18 months, we've tried to raise those salaries and give them increases, and then match that with the compression to make sure supervisors and the above. But that lower scale in which you see dragged down is mostly from some of those entry level opportunities we offer for that. And I'm proud of that. I just want to say I'm proud that we have those workers. I'm proud that we have those that work, because, and those are exempt employees, right? And that's a little different from the civil service, because that's the programs that we're able to put some of these people, and young people in particular, who want to change their life. And that's the program we're able to put them in to start. Right. So when you heard me a couple moments ago say that the city job you come into don't necessarily need to be the city job you retire out of, that's what I'm thinking of. How a person come in, they could be a laborer, and they come in that program and they could work their way to go into sanitation, become a civil service. They could work that way. We've had folks graduate out of that program and going on to L&I and be inspectors. We've had folks that going on to other departments and do semi-skilled laborer jobs. That's one of the things I tell folks who I see and interact with, who reference, I want to get in with the city, I want a CLIP job. I say, we could get you in there if you got to work after, but I don't want you to stay there. I want you to be able to build yourself up and grow. Now, there's certainly folks who we see to stay there, and we've actually had the opportunity, because I guess we've been at this for a little while now in terms of clipping at work. We've seen folks, Tommy Conway, we've seen folks retire out of those positions and, retire out of those positions, be able to get in the drop program and all of that. But that discrepancy is really because of the gamut of the positions that we run, being from laborer all the way up to some of the higher level positions.
Okay. What's the minimum salary for like entry, say laborers and CLIP program?
Yeah, I believe we rose it up to around about $37.5 now for entry-level laborers that come in with CLIP. Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong on that, sir.
It's 37, so it's about $19 an hour. Is the starting salary.
Okay, I like it, and I'm glad that you're that you're bringing people in tomorrow and giving them a chance, and Tommy to advance. And I know you two both worked your way up through the ranks too. So that's really nice to give back like that, and just to prove that people can work their way up through the ranks. You know what I mean? It's you can make a living doing this, working your way up. So thank you.
And it's a career, and it's a sustaining career
Exactly.
for folks, right? And be able to support their family. So we're proud of that. We're proud of that work. And thank you for asking that question.
I'm good.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Lozada.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. I'd like to thank my colleagues for the line of questions that they've had this morning. Many of them were some of my very same concerns. But I'd like to turn my attention to the opioid response, MDO Alexandra, that your team has been working on, and that I'm extremely grateful for. I want to recognize Tom Conway and his CLIP team for all of the work that they do over there in the Kensington-Harrogate community every day, and Pam Ramos for her presence in the community consistently. My question to you is along the lines of what Councilman Jones was referring to, which is the funding grants and the legacy funding that you mentioned earlier. I don't know, or I didn't hear, I might have missed, I might have walked away and missed your response regarding how these programs are measured, right? Is there a process by which you all measure what these folks committed to delivering consistently? And is there also a process for if we realize at some point that these folks have received funding and haven't been able to deliver, is there a mechanism in place for us to be able to say, okay, these funds need to be reallocated to someone else? And how do we provide the necessary supports for people who received the funding, right, and had every intention to want to do the work, but realized that it was far beyond their immediate capacity?
Hey, Councilwoman, thank you for that question. When Councilman Jones referenced that question, a lot of it was around the legacy prevention provider. So I kind of couched that on the side of OCF, because that's the folks, OCS and DHS, so that's the folks that deal with that. I think we talked a little bit about the methodology we used around the anti-violence grants and some of our other grants that we fund here out of MDO. I think those metrics change as it relates to the type of program that you're running. You talk about some of the work that we're doing in Kensington with those folks and some of those grants. Some of those methods are really different than the metrics that we use for we were used to say for anti-violence or that other work. But I think that's always it's always the hard part on how you looking at a grantee, and the hard part is kicking them out. The hard part is understanding the value of their work, understanding the challenges of the environments that they're working in, and then trying to work with them. So I don't think you ever see on any grant program us sort of looking at the evaluation, seeing an issue and kicking folks out right away. Now, certainly if you're not delivering the program that you told us you was delivering, that's grounds to sort of expel those folks right away. I think for the most part, we try to take those organizations that may be struggling, look at what they're doing, look at the problems they have, and try to offer them resources and give them a correction plan to build up. I can't talk about that like as it relates to folks who have been receiving funded for 10 or so, 15 or so years, because a lot of the stuff that we've been doing has been some newer stuff we've been doing within the last 3 to 5 years. But I would think I would put that standard on any grantee we will be funding, of giving them a moment to correct themselves and a correction plan before just yanking the grant out, because there are all types of challenges that may have went into why our program may be working or may not be working. As it relates particularly to the overdose reduction unit, let me call up Noel Foysen to talk a little bit about some of those projects and some of the grants that's been involved in that. As you know, from your work, not only as a council member, but from some of your life work, is that some of the stuff we've been trying to do there is sort of engage the community and ask the community, what should we be funding? down there, what type of programs we should be funding. So if you're talking about some of those packages we've put together with both city funding and with some of the opioid settlement funding, that let that community dictate what programs we should be funding, what activities we should be funding, and having some of them sit on boards that where they actually reviewing and judging some of these grant applications to look at that work and and be able to say this person or this organization should be getting this grant for this type of work. So Noel, I don't know if you want to expand a little bit on that.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Noel Foysen, and I'm the director of the Opioid Response Unit. I do wanted to say at the top that it's always hard to measure drug prevention, and so we look to measure the engagement around our programs. And so one program that we're really proud of in the Kensington community is the Kensington Community Resilience Fund. And so that is a participatory grant-making model where the actual residents are deciding who are the recipients of the grants. We're in our third round of that. We're really proud of that. That's we built up a lot of skills and buy-in in the community around that. We did recently, from the opioid settlement dollars, launch the Overdose Prevention and Community Healing Fund, which is a new grant program that we just started. There's 2 granting levels for that. There was one, a capacity building grant for $20,000, and then a program grant for $100,000. We're in the process of finalizing those decisions around those grants, but the granting decisions are being made by a community granting group. And so for the Kensington area, it was specifically people that live and work in the Kensington community are deciding which programs are going to get funded. And so we will absolutely do an evaluation of the program moving forward and incorporate all lessons learned into that.
Thank you for that. And then you mentioned the opioid prevention funding. Those groups that are receiving the funding, are they groups that have historically provided opioid prevention services in the community, or are they new groups that are coming in?
I'll have to get back to you on that one, Councilmember Lozada. And so I know that the intention was groups that have been serving that community and have been trusted in that community. And so I know that was the intent of it. And so I can get back to you. I can follow up with you on that.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think trust and knowing the community that they're serving is extremely important, right? But I also want to ensure that we are not continuing to fund programs or grantees for services that they should have already been providing, or that they've received dollars for services, and we're not going to continue to fund them and not receive those services. And so measuring their deliverables, creating benchmarks, and ensuring that services are actually being received and felt on the ground is extremely important to me. And then, Tumar, you mentioned earlier that, it's getting warmer. Everyone is concerned about the ability of community residents to be able to use their parks and recreation centers, their library spaces. You all know that, we have McPherson Square that is a library, is a play space. I think CLIP does an amazing job on a regular basis to try to keep it safe for children and families to be able to use it and play in. What is the plan? Is there a plan for us is there a strategy for us to be able to make that space safe for community residents to be able to come into as the weather gets warmer?
Thanks, Councilwoman. I'm glad Noel's still on screen. I'll let her respond to that. I will say that Noel shared with me a good Easter video from, I think, one of the community leaders there of an Easter egg hunt out there on McPherson Square, and it was like I felt like a kid again, to be honest. But I think that work, and that's a collective work. You all think CLIP, and CLIP certainly does a whole lot, but that's a collective work with a bunch of city agencies. With all of the partners that all of the partners in Kensington and Harrogate in that community, with the advisory board, and certainly with your office and Council Member Harity and Council Member Squilla's office. That's not something I'm gonna take credit for on us all. That's a real collective work that's been years in the making, and it really only comes from constantly communicating with each other, talking about the challenges, us sometimes putting a plan together, going back, taking that plan off the wall, doing something different, and adhering to some of the challenges that we see on the ground. So kind of proud from that Easter egg hunt video. But I'll let Noel talk a little bit around what we're doing with Parks and Recs and others around that activities. in that particular area.
Hi, yes, thank you for that question. And so since, might say since last spring, there's been really close coordination between Parks and Rec Department rangers and the police department to really to look at trying to resetting the norms in all the park spaces in the Kensington area. And so there's been a real focus on ensuring that there's no open drug use, enforcing the curfew, making sure that there's no encampments forming in the parks. And so they've been working together around that. And then also there's been a whole activation piece that we've been working on. And so last summer was really led by Parks and Rec, but since then there's been a lot of community organizations that have sort of seen the work that has gone there, has seen the opportunity of having positive activations in McPherson Square and coming to the table with us to work on the plan moving forward. And so since last summer, we had a ton of great activations in the park last summer, and then we also had additional activations fall, winter. We have a great schedule coming up this spring, and again, a super robust program this summer. And so there's great partnership, I'd say, across public safety and looking at trying to make sure that we're able to create these safe spaces for kids and families to enjoy in the Kensington area.
Thanks, Noel.
The call dropped, but I appreciate your response. I want to commend Shannon Farrell and her group for such an amazing event for the Easter egg hunt, because that really is who Harrogate is, right? That space really brought Harrogate families and Kensington families together in a green space, which is what it's supposed to look like, right? They're supposed to be taking advantage of those spaces. My hope is that we can do the same for the McPherson Square Library area, and that together we can come up with a strategy where that space becomes a safe place for those community residents to be able to enjoy. I think I'll hold on to the next round for further questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman, I have one question. Were they like real eggs, or were like the newfangled plastic eggs with candy inside of them?
Man, we'd have been in trouble if they were real eggs. They were plastic eggs full of candy.
I just wonder. I remember that transition.
Council President, some folks actually do. Some of the ritzier folks, I haven't been in one of these myself, I'm just going to say. But some folks do the plastic eggs with like the dollar bill in them. So if anybody hear about those, I want to get an invite next year to participate.
I like that too.
Yeah, well, that was awesome.
Along with the candy.
Yeah, it's good that kids are allowed to be kids, right? You know, we really need to be able to do that. Thank you so much, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Council President, and thank you, Mr. Managing Director. I also wanted to start by giving kudos to Tom Conway, because I heard folks talking about him and his team over at CLIP. He has just been a stellar professional to work with back to my days as a constituent services representative in government. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for your team and for all of your great work. I wanted to start off, Mr. Managing Director, with talking about the Office of Sustainability. How do you believe the Managing Director's office works to really uplift the work of the Office of Sustainability and prioritize climate resiliency and environmental justice throughout all of the departments that you oversee and that are in your wheelhouse? And what is your role with ensuring that all of the city departments that are under your purview participate in the climate change and environmental justice interagency working group?
Hey, thank you, Councilwoman, for that. I think one of the main things I see my role and myself as is being that support and advocate in a way, but also holding the departments and holding the organizations to task on the work that we've promised folks that we will do. But the main thing is to be the support for the office, right? So when advocating for resources, when folks being creative about trying to find resources, when folks need resources or funding that may or may not be in the budget, making some of those hard decisions around when an organization, if you want to just reference like sustainability or others, come to us for things that may not be in that budget, maybe looking at some things we may be underspending in other categories and making that decision to say, let's prioritize this work and be able to support. I'm real proud of that work that Salim and the predecessor prior to him have done with that work, especially with that relationship they've had on some of our more challenging issues. So when you look at the flooding that we've experienced in Eastwick, that relationship they created to be that convener for that community of bringing together all of the city government resources, state government, and now federal government resources to look at how do we support and address that issue. Those folks were on first name basis with Salim and his staff. So that was just a testament to the work that office has done. I would say, this is an opportunity for me to call up Deputy Manager Director Mike Carroll, who oversees the operations, to talk about it. But it's really for us providing that support, Councilwoman. And I think the one thing I would say up top is that all of us, right, all of us in any department of government, none of us will sit here and tell you we have absolutely every bit of resources and funding that we need to get a job done. But what we will tell you is that we take the resources that's given to us and we try to do our best job to deliver those services. So, and being in this seat, in this position, I'm one of the ones who then got to go and make and holler and scream a little bit and just work collaboratively. It's not hollering and screaming. It's more of a collaborative effort with our folks to see how can we increase those resources and how can we adequately sort of come up with, come support some of these challenges. But as it relates to bringing all of the departments to the table on the climate justice and that sort of work, there's not apprehension from our departments around participating and understanding the value. I think one of the things we do up front and have to do is explain to the department why this is a priority for us, and then be able to be able to give them this is where this fits in. Because folks may believe every time I pick up the phone and I call and I'm yelling or I'm screaming or I'm just asking about something, I don't necessarily want that issue to jump to the top of the charts in the department. I want to make the department aware of it. I certainly want it resolved, but there's a lot of priorities we put on them. So the challenges for us as leaders is helping them shift through and making sure they have the resources to be able to address those. But Mike, I wanted you to have an opportunity, because you work the closest with that cluster in office, to have an opportunity to add into that.
Well, and really quick before Mike starts, I just wanted to thank you for mentioning the federal work that is happening, because that the Office of Sustainability, they are engaged in an important planning effort regarding the Lower South, and they're doing some really important work on place-based initiatives, particularly in Eastwick that you mentioned. And I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Johnson, for all of his partnership and for the partnership of his staff. But this is really crucial environmental justice and climate resiliency work for the city of Philadelphia. And it's really unprecedented, sort of the level of engagement that we currently have with the federal government. And we've worked really closely with the administrators at the EPA, as I'm a member of the Local Government Advisory Committee for the EPA. And I'm the only person from Philadelphia, the only official from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I'm really seeking to utilize this opportunity as an opportunity for the city of Philadelphia. And the real reason why I brought it up is because I guess in the testimony and in the notes, it states that the administration is spending $202,000 per year on the EJAC, but in the 5-year plan, that information does not match. It appears to be a cut in the Class 200 funds for the Office of Sustainability. And in addition to that, a private foundation has offered the city a 2-to-1 matching fund program to expand on all of that work to launch community resiliency grant programs. And so I wanted to bring that up and get it on the record, because we do have a unique opportunity currently with the support and help of the federal officials and also of the foundation to help us get additional dollars into the city of Philadelphia. So I just wanted someone to be able to explain that to me, that the $202,000 per year for EJAC does not align with what is listed in the budget detail for the Office of Sustainability, in order for us to maximize that 2-to-1 matching opportunity from the foundation and support from the government.
Yeah, Councilwoman, thank you for that. I think one of the things you see and has been past practice is that when things get added in the council caucus process, or when things get added through the caucus process, those things don't necessarily get annualized over the 5-year plan. So they're added sort of each year through each of the processes. I believe that's what some of this reduction is, but I'm gonna go back and check and be able to provide a written response to that, because I'm also being told that some of that also might have been a one-time grant or a grant that expired. So we'll go back and make sure I provide a written response to that particular question. But Mike, I know you wanted to jump in on this as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I first want to, Michael Carroll, Deputy Managing Director for the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. I want to thank you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, for your leadership on all of these issues, especially all the work you do to represent the interests of the city of Philadelphia in state and national forum. With respect to the cut, it's about money that came to sustainability to actually fund work that the Philadelphia Energy Authority is doing. So that was a one-time pass-through type payment so that they can start to pursue Inflation Reduction Act funding. So if there's a need in the future for us to look for some resources to do that, we will put together some sort of ask in the normal budget process. But that's why you see a cut. It's not a reduction in the EJ funding. The EJ staff is fully funded, and that's now going to be the baseline moving forward. If I could just take one more minute, I just wanted to emphasize some of the points that the managing director was making. I think we recognize the tremendous work that the Office of Sustainability does, but we also know to have the impact they need to have, they need to leverage their resources through other departments. And I think we've done a really good job doing that. I appreciate you recognizing the work around the Lower South, Streets Department, Water Department, the airport, are all involved in that work in some way. We've got a lot of great partnerships with stakeholders like PennDOT, the stadium districts involved. We're looking to have more conversations even with Delaware County. So that type of work involves a lot of cover, for lack of a better word, that the managing director and folks in the mayor's administration have helped us obtain. And so we want to keep doing that. And then in doing that, pursue federal funds so that we can actually resource more of the work. So again, your partnership along those lines and partnership around the whole administration is really helpful to make that a success.
Sure. Well, I just want to thank you too, Mike Carroll, for all of your work. And you walk right into a few of the additional questions I have regarding some staffing investments around the bipartisan infrastructure law and then also IRA. So I'll come back on the second round to respect the clock, but I wanted to ask about that as well. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gaudier.
Thank you, Council President. My next question is about block parties. So since we're coming up on summertime, I wanted to touch on this issue for a bit. Block parties are a time-honored tradition that makes Philly, Philly, but in the area I represent, many times block parties are denied by the police department because of criminal activity or a problem block. There was reporting showing that this happens most in West and North Philadelphia due to levels of gun violence in these areas. And police captains have a lot of discretion over whether block parties are allowed or disallowed. So I've worked with captains that have relented after a denial, but also with captains that take a very conservative approach. And I know that we're all concerned about gun violence, very concerned, but the practice of denying block parties seems very counterproductive to me. It would seem that having blocks where people are connecting with one another and having fun and getting to know each other as neighbors actually makes us more safe. It also seems like a pretty unfair burden to place on an individual police captain that they have to personally approve or disapprove block events happening within their areas. And I also think that it adds to the sentiment in many communities of color that they are over-policed. It's quite literally turning the PPD into the fun police. And so I have a few questions about this practice. One, Managing Director, do you think the practice of outlawing block parties in certain areas is making us safer? And what data do you have that backs that up? Secondly, what recourse should residents have when their application is denied for any particular reason, but especially if the application is denied because of criminal activity or alleged violence in the area? And under what circumstances would MDO do away with this practice of having the police department approve or disapprove block parties?
Thank you, council member. Thank you for referencing this issue. Being a lifelong Philadelphian, I do understand the traditional block parties and how sacred it is to everyone, including my own mother and her neighbors who forcefully make me turn their block party petition in. One of the things I will say, I know I've seen some media stuff that generated, I want to say last summer, particularly around your district. I do think this somewhat is an unfair burden on police. I do think that's somewhat of an unfair burden to put on the district captains. But I know one of the things I do know is just not the district captains in this conversation. I know they also got to report up their reasoning to their respecters and then to the chiefs. I think for us, we probably need to work on a policy to put up a more transparent appeal policy for when folks get this message. I think part of the concern is like with somewhat limited resources, those folks and those captains and those folks who are on the ground in the district are really concerned about how they can keep that activity safe for all of the residents to participate in. I've certainly been involved in several conversations to where a permit may have been denied and then the person requested an appeal on it, and in some instances have appealed on my own to that district captain or to that inspector, and ask sort of, my question is always ask, what was the reason and why, if that was accurate or what they're seeing as knowing their district and knowing the crime trends in that district. Or certainly it's been times where I've got back, this is a notorious drug block. We made X number of arrests on this block within the last few months. Our concerns is X, right? But I agree. I do think it's counterproductive because I don't think we should not have block parties because a block isn't safe. I think we should be working on ways to how can we work with that sort of active block captain because we know that person is active or that group is active. How can we work with them to ensure the safety on that block? And how could it be a partnership? So that's certainly some of the conversations we need to have. And actually, it's one of the things that has been on my mind as before I took this job as managing director. I'll be honest, I never had an opportunity to be able to address it. I've certainly had one-off conversations with both streets department and police department around it. I think I'll make a commitment that we'll work together. Excuse me. We'll work together on a process that sort of adds in an appeals piece and look at a process to where folks understand it, and then folks can feel like they're actively, we're actively taking in consultation the need to have these situations and parties. And that may also include put more eyes than just the police and the streets department on these permits, right? Certainly those district captains and those district supervisors know what's going on in that neighborhood. Certainly those block captains who's making this request know. But I think at the end of the day, all of us the goal is for folks to have fun, for folks to connect with their neighbors, and for folks to be safe, right? So if that's our goal, I think we could all work together on sort of coming up with ways to make that a better system.
Yeah, I look forward to that for this year, having more transparency on this issue, having a way of a real recourse for people on blocks. But over time, I also look forward to moving this out of the hands of PPD. And I respect PPD. They're doing, obviously a very valuable public safety function, but.
And it's actually on our Office of Criminal Justice Programs actually put it in some of their internal diversity, equity, and inclusion work as one of their work streams that they want to work on as well. So it is something that's actively being worked on.
Thank you so much. Look forward to talking more.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And thank you for raising that issue. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Managing Director, the Councilwoman brings up an interesting point. Actually, in parts of my councilmatic district, we have a different set of challenges around Temple University. And I can recall when the police department first got engaged in this process around the university, it was that students were getting permits for block parties in neighborhoods, and particularly where there was a significant number of students on those blocks. They got the application, they submitted, and they ended up turning into concerts in the middle of a residential community. So in that particular instance, it is a challenge, and who makes that decision?
Yeah, it absolutely, and it needs to be balanced, and it needs to be balanced in that approach. So absolutely.
So it would be interesting to see what level of strategies you have for that, because some of these things can be problematic depending on the neighborhood and who the applicant is for the particular block party. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, colleagues. Couple things. We definitely got to get the block party thing situated, because I don't want to answer that question. So please figure that out. In 2020, Managing Director Alexander, when I'm first sworn in, I become the chair of the Streets Committee. Of course, we go into a pandemic. It creates a lot of problems. And one of the problems that the pandemic created that we're not talking about enough is the hit and run crisis. The hit and run crisis really went on steroids in 2020. Even right now, it's not as bad as it was in 2020, but it's still bad. And when we had a conversation back then to examine what we were dealing with as it was related to hit and runs, we came across two solutions that we talked about implementing as it relates to addressing hit and runs. The first one was investment in infrastructure. And this is, I believe, for you guys, come under your role to make the roadmap to safer communities. No, that's not it. I apologize. It's the infrastructure investment dollars that went into, I believe, Otis. And the second thing we talked about was the hit and run technology that the police department said they need. Captain Overwise specifically testified to the importance of getting the technology needed to be able to collect the proper amount of evidence when a hit and run takes place. So in the 2021 budget, I remember negotiating for the managing director's office to get the technology that was needed to be able to collect evidence when hit and runs take place. I'm wondering where we are as it relates to the technology surrounding hit and runs, and how are we doing with the infrastructure dollar investments that we talked about as it relates to I believe the number was 12% of roads that produce 80% of the car accidents. So I'm wondering if we can get an update on where we are with those two things.
Yeah, will do, sir. So Mike just popped on the screen. I believe he could talk through the Vision Zero work. I just want to agree with you that has been pedestrian safety, pedestrian death as it relates to vehicles have been an issue that we've seen since the pandemic. I remember at some portion of 2020 when we were on shutdown, and I think folks used that opportunity to think because the streets was a little emptier, they was just driving as if it was a raceway all across the city. And it was one moment to where I was actually taken aback by it on one instance. So that work and the work that Mike and Chris do around Vision Zero is very important. I will talk, since PPD is on, I'm probably going to see if Deputy Commissioner Krista Dow Campbell could talk a little bit about the technology, but that technology was procured for the department, council member, and I know they're using it to help recreate some of these, electronically and laserly be able to recreate some of these accident scenes in terms of helping them with their investigation. But excuse me, Mike, you want to start out the conversation, and then we'll have PPD answer particularly around the technology for the crash investigation unit division. Mike, you're on mute, sir.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, thank you, council member. So I might defer for some specifics to Chris Bahalski, but I'll say that we feel like we are starting to turn the corner a little bit as some of the projects that we're doing in our high injury network are coming online, and that's the name, the high injury network, that we use to refer to that 12% of streets where the overwhelming majority of crashes take place. Whether they are hits that have people run or whether there are crashes where people do actually stick around. We want to avoid the hit part as much as possible. So we're gratified that what we see in the early indications is that these projects are effective. but we need to do much more. And so the other good news, I guess I would say, is that we're having a tremendous success rate in getting federal infrastructure funding. One of the things the council should know is that because the city of Philadelphia already had a Vision Zero action plan, we were eligible for construction funds, not planning funds, but construction funds as part of the Safe Streets for All program that was stood up by the United States Department of Transportation. And we got a little less than a month ago a $30 million grant in order to do construction projects on the high injury network to start to address these things. So we have a few of those projects in design. So we hope we will be able to move some of them through in the next fiscal year here and get some of this stuff done. But it is a long-term proposition. We're grateful. We've done very well in all of our federal requests. I think we've exceeded about $200 million in federal funds that have come in the last year. And one of the reasons why we're so successful is because we're always able to emphasize two things that are very important to the Biden administration. One is traffic safety, and the other one is racial equity. And so these things are the future that we're looking at, but we still have a lot of work to do as far as where we're at. We understand that.
I hope that bell was because it's time to be done with that particular question. That 7 minutes must have got cut fast.
Hey, Councilmember, really fast, could I have Krista Dow Campbell sort of just confirm the technology that CID procured and is using right now to your first part of your question?
Sure. Good afternoon, Councilman and everyone on the call. I'm Krista Dahl Campbell. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Organizational Services. So FARO 3D scanner systems were procured by PPD's OFS for crash investigations. So the Forensic Science Unit did put it, and so it is being used by the Crash Investigation Unit, as well as the Crime Scene Unit. So I'm sure Director Garvey could speak to how effective it is, but it is in place. It took a while to get it because of procurement issues, but they are using it now. And it has been a useful tool to document scenes and for reconstruction. So it definitely has had a positive impact. If there's any direct question you have on its implementation, I can pass it over to both Deputy Benor or to Director Garvey.
Don't get me in trouble. I'll wait until we go into the police round and save that for a little victory lap for us to do as a win that we all got together. And as I close out, let me just say this because this is really important. Before we get into the police department, I'm going to call a couple families who I know who lost loved ones in the city of Philadelphia, who have used the death of their loved ones to advocate for things like this new technology and other things as relates to infrastructure investment, to give the life of their loved ones purpose. So just so you know, sometimes the small things we do go a long way for the constituents in the city of Philadelphia. Council President, I'll stop right there. I already did 2 rounds, and I'll submit my remaining question for the Managing Director's Office in writing, and Managing Director Tumar and the entire team over the Managing Director's Office. I just want to say thank you. And please don't forget my request to make some money available for emergencies in the summertime. I'm very, very concerned about making sure that we have dollars and resources available to people who really want to provide quality programming for our children. And that includes my idea about a sports fund that's similar to the cultural fund. Thank you, Council President. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for that good work. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you again, Council President. I wanted to just circle back to one additional question I had, and I will submit the remainder of my questions for the record, in addition to the questions I have for and about the Office of Sustainability. But Mr. Managing Director, I wanted to find out how your office is working to create more collaboration between the Department of Human Services, the Philadelphia Police Department, the Office of Violence Prevention, and the Office of Children and Families to ensure that our community evening resource centers are being fully utilized, not only by the community, but in the way of its intended purpose relative to getting young people people to the CERCs, and we know they can come voluntarily and or involuntarily. So I wanted to know, based on some of the conversation that was I had earlier and recognizing some of the things that we've seen happen over the last couple of weekends, how are you all using the updated curfew that this body passed as a part of the violence prevention strategy and sort of your overall strategy? And how are you all working to sort of create a summer strategy that will engage young people, not just in the CERCs, but in work and education, sports, as my colleague Councilmember Thomas stated, and community-based programming that will go on all day, 7 days a week? How are we sort of marketing these efforts, and how are we ensuring that the centers are actually being utilized? Like, what is the sort of collaboration that happens from a government perspective internally? And I know that we, based on the legislation, are supposed to receive specific updates, and I will ask PPD about the updated curfew numbers, particularly by division. But how are you all working to ensure that that cross collaboration is happening internally from a city government perspective?
Thanks, Councilwoman. I'm gonna start off and do a little bit of comments up top, and then maybe kick it over to Mary Horseman. But there's a lot of, that relationship between MDO, OCF, and DHS, I think, is probably as strong as it's been in probably a long time. Those leaders, Kim Ali, the Commissioner of the Department of Human Services, Vanessa Gary Harley, our Deputy Mayor for Children and Youth. That relationship is strong just because of the connection of her being over here, probably us talking a couple times a day, every day. But on that, in particular, on that summer table that she chairs around summer programming, there's a couple folks from MDO at that table, in addition to the departments that's sitting at that table, in particular police. But there's other departments that's at that table from MDO that participates. But our violence prevention folks, so Erica and her team sits at that table. Mary Horseman, our Deputy Managing Director of Health and Human Services, sat at that table when she was our policy director, also sits at that table in her current role. So a lot of times we go back and forth with the support on the summer program, and sometimes when they have a funding, where they can't find funding, there was money that we utilize, in particular from the violence prevention funding that I will fund for programming over there and for work that's happening over there. Just to talk a little bit about that, like the initiative that we're doing with the pools this year. Last year, Parks and Rec did a couple, they did something in some of the Kensington communities where they took it to two pools and sort of gave it the look of a beach club. And we were sitting in one of these meetings and they were showing pictures, and I talked about how good that looked. And I said I was willing to fund through violence prevention money that we could do this in some of our high violence areas. And can we do it in 12 to 13 sites within those zones that we've set up through police and pinpoint to be able to do that? So that's something you're going to see this summer. That's a collaborative work. But I'll have Mary talk about more of the collaborative work. And I think, as you've referenced, police could talk about in particular, they could talk about the work they're doing with the resource centers and the young people we're getting there. I will tell you, on that incident that happened last week in Center City, Kim Ali was on the phone with myself and with one of the deputy police commissioners. We were kind of giving them a heads up. This was going on. You should alert the resource centers because they may see an influx of folks coming there tonight, and was able to kind of keep them constantly communicating with them on what was going on, not only from a resource center perspective, but also from a juvenile justice services center perspective as well. Because all of that stuff tie in. So the crowding that's there, the work about how we're doing with the resource center, the stuff we're doing with police and the MDO with the juvenile access center, all of that work sort of tie in, and those folks at that table. So Mary, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of that work and some of that collaborative efforts.
That'll be great. And before Mary starts, I just wanted to reiterate my request from the original budget hearing, of the first budget hearing, relative to a document or a booklet that puts together all of the resources that'll be available for young people for this summer. If you could put a QR code on the front, that would be great, because they all have a smartphone. Because I will tell you, even as someone who has worked in city government for a very long time as a staffer and has helped with constituent services, it is very difficult for me to navigate some of those websites on phila.gov. And I think I'm pretty technology, savvy. And it's very hard to find the programs that are available when you're looking for like a certain subset. So I'll give you an example. If I'm looking for a summer program for my 6-year-old or for my 8-year-old, it's really hard to find. Like it's difficult to even navigate the website in that way. So my request, and I'll reiterate it before Mary begins, is if we can get a listing of everything that is available from every city department, whether it's PPR, DHS, whoever it's coming from, Office of Violence Prevention, just put all of that together in one space and place. And even if they break it down by police division, that'll be helpful because we know we have the 2 additional CERC centers that are coming online in the Northeast Division and also in the East Division by June, is what we were told. So if we could get all that information in one space and place, that would be exceedingly helpful because also I think for us as members, we will better understand how to resource some of these other activities that may need additional resources to stay open a couple more hours. It's not helpful for parents who work for a program to be open from 9 to 3, and then you still have to pay extra for aftercare in a city where we know a lot of families and parents are resource strapped. And so we want young people to participate in these opportunities, but we have to make it readily available to them and make the information available and make it where council can invest in the opportunities that young people will need to be a part of that need to stay open late.
We could collaboratively put that together, Councilwoman, so we'll work on that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but I want to thank the Councilwoman for her leadership on this particular issue. And as you spoke to, Managing Director and the council member, this is really about building a system. And so I think with your guidance, we created the community evening resource centers in areas throughout the city to make it easier for youth to get connected, for parents to pick up their child, for police to be able to connect them to services immediately, and not have that sort of time friction created. And so really when we think about how do we strengthen that work, it's really thinking about how are we diverting youth who we're likely to end up at the PJJSC to the evening resource centers, getting them the resources that they need, getting them connected to programming over the medium and long term that's recurring, so that they don't end up back in the center. So, one of the things we're doing is if youth are diverted from the PJJSC to the Juvenile Assessment Center, then using the evening resource centers as another tool in that toolkit to be able to connect them to services. So again, thinking about how we think about high and medium risk youth, what the services that they need, and really working closely with DHS and the Office of Children and Families to make sure those services are being located at community evening resource centers.
Okay, I heard the bell and I want to respect the clock. I will reserve the balance of my questions and submit them in writing. But I'm really interested in this, particularly for this summer, based on what we've seen. And also recognizing it's going to be 85 degrees Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And if we don't have it together, you will get what you always have, which is what we saw last week and the week before. So we really have to be on top of it in doing our part. But I'll reserve the balance of my questions and I'll wait for the police department. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Council Lady. I think that's all we have for the MDO today. But obviously there will be some callbacks. Before we leave the MDL, I'd just like to ask if the clip and Tommy folks can, if you have it available, categorize in terms of the locations of deployment. I know a significant part is in response to 311 calls, which I don't, frankly speaking, like. Because it leaves people that don't call 311 without services, but that's another story for another time. And at some point, I don't know if it'll be while I'm still here, but we will figure out a way to consolidate all vacant lot treatment programs and not just be responsive to 311. But can you give me forward to us the levels, the locations of deployment over the last year, calendar year, from CLIP across the city of Philadelphia?
We could absolutely get that to you, Council President.
All right.
And I do want to say it's not only It's 311 plus there's other methods that we receive complaints that we work on as well. So we could absolutely forward that information to you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a call from the councilman on Saturday morning, all that. I know, but I'm just saying, you know, look. On serious note, I've been talking to you all about this forever. Everybody says, "Yeah, you're right," and this proactive approach to vacant lot treatments in neighborhoods is the way to go versus just simply responding to somebody calling and saying it's a problem.
Yep.
And being able to utilize PHS, being able to use same-day pay, and have all of these various entities working together, taking out grids like we used to do in the old days. We would grid an area, we would go through and have treatment. You remember what was the name of that, Tumar? You were a youngster back then.
It was ATI, sir.
No, Partners for Progress. It was even
I came in on NTI, but I got I'm not gonna say I got hazed, but I got trained by Tommy and Oliver and other folks who were Partner for Progress veterans. So
you brought
I didn't say on the record I got hazed. So
remember that all the city services came in a neighborhood, right? And you did this systematically across the city of Philadelphia in every part, and it was just so remarkable in the buy-in from people. But we got away from that when we got into this 311 thing, you know, and those, you know, but that was all about somebody trying to prove the 311 was the way to go. And it is, but it's not the only way to go. So anyway, that probably won't be done during my tenure, but hopefully my colleagues that will continue to be here keep pushing the Partners for Progress. I'm going to get some information on that so people can see how good that actually functions. All right, but if you can get me in the meantime, forward to us the deployments of CLIP over the last year, it'll be helpful.
We have been, Mr. President, we have been targeting the PRSC areas, the pinpoint areas. We claimed about 6,000 vacant lots in there out of the 14,000 that we did citywide, and that's where our fencing program is going in there. And I think it was like 250 fences were done last year, and this year we'll probably do over 300 fences, and the majority of them are in the PRC area. Yeah. Same thing with doors and windows. So it is like Partners for Progress, and sort of. But I know what you're saying.
You remember it was awesome. And the elected officials would actually come out, right? it was awesome. Anyway, all right. Well, if you can, just hit forward it when you get it together in writing. I'd like to see the deployment across the city of Philadelphia. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Managing Director and your team.
Wait, excuse me, Mr. President.
I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I'll be brief with one question. What is the city's, if we all agree that poverty is the primary source of some of the violence we see in the city of Philadelphia, some of the mischief we see among our young people, can you have Mr. Little maybe or Eva Gladstein articulate the city's anti-poverty efforts?
I'll call on, let me call on Mr. Little. I saw him on camera earlier. Then we could call on Eva if we need her to close out on it. Thank you, Councilmember Jones. Mitch, you're on mute, although your computer don't say it's on mute, so. Hey, council member, let me switch up the order while Mitch take care of the technical difficulties. Let me have Mary Horseman jump in first, and then I'll have Mitch close out.
Hi, council member. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you so much for the question. So, I think we've been really focused on thinking about how, as you said, violence intersects with poverty. And as an administration, we've been committed to our anti-poverty strategy, and we've seen the poverty rate really go down. We're at a 15-year low, and we continue to make investments in low-income households, cushioning residents against the broader effects of the economic instability. So in addition to the things you see outside of the MDO budget, like new pre-K seats, $282 million for the school district, making sure that the youth have free internet through our PHL Connected and things like the Cato Scholarship. We're also thinking about how we invest at MDO in programs like Same Day Work and Pay, which will provide, in the last year, provided over 1,400 participants with jobs in the community. And as the managing director spoke to, it's also a pathway to city employment. A lot of those jobs are at CLIP or at Mural Arts, and then they are able to transition into permanent positions within city government. The $31 million investment in the Zero Fare Transit program will be able to serve 25,000 residents at or near the poverty level. And in addition, we're going to be putting in $1.3 million in stipends for participants in the group violence intervention program, as well as have $5 million to clear criminal justice debts, which we know are a significant barrier to individuals being able to access jobs. So, and that's on top of the $29 million we're going to be investing in eviction prevention, including expanding right to counsel to guarantee free legal assistance for individuals in 4 zip codes who are experiencing eviction proceedings. So that's just a sample of some of the things that we are really focused on in terms of ways that we are going to combat poverty this year. But we can send you a complete list of the things that we are pushing to be able to address the poverty issue.
Mitch, is your sound working now, sir?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council President, Council members. Mitch Little, Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity. Like Mary shared, I mean, I think that poverty alleviation is certainly a priority for this administration, and shared how both managing director and other parts, specifically children and families, are addressing the poverty issue. For CEO's role, CEO is the city's anti-poverty agency, allowed to connect residents with CSBG formula funding. And that's like federal intervention at the local level. And so what we saw with expanded CTC and EITC was life-changing, right? We saw a 43% nationally reduction of child poverty. It requires those type of federal interventions to play out locally. And so we're super excited about the infrastructure package and equitable sort of approaches to infrastructure here in the city. For CEO, we connected over 11,000 community members to more than $28 million in federal and state refunds. Our Beneficiary program, which is one of our most popular programs since its inception, we've connected 150,000 Philadelphians to over $1.6 billion in benefit access. We stood up our Consumer Protection Task Force in partnership with law and the Treasurer's office. We can't do our work without really targeted investment and the ability to nurture and manage good relationships both inside and outside of government. And so this body had a hearing around the practices of MV Realty as an example, which targeted 500 residents, mostly Black and brown and elderly, with predatory practices, attaching a 40-year lien on houses up to 3% of the house's value if they decided to make any type of transaction with that home. And we interceded along with local and statewide partners to bring that to light, continue to educate and inform residents about these practices, and also connect residents to supports. Our financial empowerment centers since 2013 help folks save through one-on-one counseling over $3.6 million and reduce debt by $17 million. And so really keeping dollars in the pockets of Philadelphians, but also looking at where the disparity is to target our resources, oftentimes low income, Black and brown, single-led households, some of the most vulnerable households in the city, to provide some protection and support for Philadelphians. So that's just an example of the work that we've been doing. We've been able to do that with consistent support from the administration, shouting out the managing director, Eva Gladstein, to be able to manage those relationships. We partner with over 250 community-based organizations throughout the city, whether that's our eviction task force work or our housing security work coming out of our eviction task force, or our place-based work, connecting with eds and meds and civics in the Promise Zone, to really think about how we agree upon how we change outcomes for Philadelphians and move in the same direction over a period of time. So some of these are like 10-year initiatives because change requires time, and it requires that consistency around who's really putting in that work, and really bringing some of these ideas to fruition. So just as a brief example of the work that we've been engaged in over the last 10 years.
So first of all, Mr. Little, I have watched the evolution of your agency go from MOX to CEO. President Clark will tell you, I once asked the agency, how do people become poor? What is the pathway out of poverty? And for the first time, I actually understand a strategy that is quantitatively worked. You reduce the poverty level in the city of Philadelphia. And I would say this to my fellow members of council. We are sleeping on CEO and the work that they do. They are the conduit to many of the successful anti-poverty programs, either direct service or indirect funding of those services. And I can't say enough about you. I'm not going to hold my colleagues up, but while I am going to warn you, I'm going to call you back so that you can have an elongated presentation, because I don't think people truly understand, from eliminating debt in prisons. You eliminated the concessions, the fees and fines that were up at the prisons, to what you do for thousands of people below the poverty line that are now not leaving money on the table. Alan Dom used to, every budget cycle, talk about we leave too much federal state money on the table. And CEO is helping a lot of poor people pick it up off the table. And so thank you for what you guys do and your team.
Thank you, Council Member. I will say that it is we appreciate your support. I will say, and I won't speak for the manager director, but for guys who born and raised in Philadelphia, who come from let's say meager beginnings, it's an honor and duty to do this on behalf of Philadelphians, because we understand what it's like. We understand the struggle of waking up every day and not to have, and to go out there and try to get in one way or another. And as a young person, who a lot like the young people that you all were talking about earlier today, there is a pathway out. You could be sitting here, right here, if only you hold on, stay true, and connect to services and caring adults to make your way out. We are living examples of that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, man.
You good?
I'm good.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Managing Director, thank you very much, sir. You and your team.
Thank
Take
you,
a
Council President.
second. And is the Deputy Police Commissioner available and ready? Deputy Commissioner Stanford, you good?
Yes, sir.
How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. And yourself?
Hey, I'm blessed. Never had a bad day in most of my life. You know. All right, we're gonna proceed. You can, sir, you can start your testimony.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Council President and distinguished members of City Council. My name is John Stanford. I am the first Deputy Commissioner of the Philadelphia Police Department. It is an honor to testify before you today on behalf of Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw, who is unable to be present today. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the status of policing here in Philadelphia. Please let me allow me to introduce the other members of the Commissioner's executive team who are joining me today. Krista Dow Campbell, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Organizational Services. James Kelly, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Patrol Operations. Frank Venor, Deputy Commissioner of Investigations. Robin Wimberly, Deputy Commissioner of the Office of Professional Responsibility. Blake Norton, Chief Strategy Officer. Joel Dells, Deputy Commissioner of Special Operations. Leslie Morant, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. Mike Garvey, Director of the Office of Forensic Science. Elka Battle-Murillo, Director of Strategic Communications. Staff Inspector Francis Healy, Special Advisor to the Police Commissioner. Dr. Nicola Smith-Key, Executive in Residence. And other esteemed PPD personnel are here to respond if called upon. With that, let me just give you a quick overview of our plans for the fiscal year of 2024. The FY2024 proposed general fund allocation funds the police department at 6,380 uniformed officers. The total FY24 operating budget is estimated to increase over the FY23 current projection by approximately $55.7 million. The FY24 proposed general fund allocation in Class 100 is increased to account for contractually obligated pay raises as well as approved raises for exempt positions and the transfer of 75 police communication dispatchers from the MDO, along with the addition of 49 civilian positions at the Office of Forensic Science. Class 200 is increasing to cover the cost of PPD recruitment with a diversity, equity, and inclusion focus, the transfer of training from the Managing Director's office, and the inflation increases for existing services and purchases. With that being said, we have submitted our testimony, and we are here to answer any questions that you may have. Therefore, I will turn it back over to you, Council President, to begin.
Okay. Commissioner, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Sorry, yeah, my computer's acting up. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And we appreciate what you do. Seems like things are improving somewhat. Fingers always crossed. Let me get into a couple of things. I just want to, first of all, congratulate you on being first deputy. Congratulate the team for continuing. We're getting ready to release, and I don't know to what degree, but you've been involved. This whole issue around vacancies among the police and all other municipal government. We actually did an announcement, fill a whole lot of jobs, and we'll be rolling out the work product of the special committee. And we actually had Captain McCoy, whom I think you know, was a member of the special committee to talk about attraction and retention. And then in your role, and I actually used to talk to the commissioner about this. What can you tell me what the challenges are in terms of getting people to be a police officer, particularly in today's time, from your perspective, and the challenges of keeping individuals once they become police officers? Because my understanding is we're being poached quite aggressively by surrounding townships, counties, other states. I mean, Orlando's office and this crazy package, big old billboards on 76, you know, showing somebody with the sun and the beach. It's kind of hard to compete to that, particularly on a 32-degree day in the city of Philadelphia. Can you just kind of tell me from your perspective and some of the challenges that we have, and one, convincing people, and two, keeping people on the force, which is an understandably challenging job, but I'm assuming that to do this, it has to be about the heart. It can't be about other things.
You're absolutely right, sir. So we're down about 850 officers or so. And as you stated, it's a constant challenge for us, and we're doing a lot around recruitment. And I'll turn it over to Deputy Dow Campbell to give some of that in a moment.
But again, you see the challenges, right? I mean, coming out of years of the past few years, where quite frankly, police haven't been the most popular profession, right? And so that is starting to shift slightly, coming out of civil unrest and just some trying times. And to be quite blunt, some of the issues and challenges that our men and women face every day makes it a little bit of a challenge to entice more people to come into this profession. And again, not just something Philadelphia is experiencing, but it's something that I think you've seen across the country. With that all being said, we're working with every entity that we possibly can to try to entice more individuals. I even see when we put out the postings for open recruitment, you yourself will tweet out some of that information. And again, I would encourage every council member to do the same, because this is an us problem, right? And trying to make sure that we recruit enough individuals to police our city in the safest possible manner. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Deputy Dow Campbell to go into some more specifics as to what our recruitment unit is doing in an effort to try to capture more individuals into this profession and wanting to join specifically Philadelphia Police Department. Deputy Dow Campbell.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. Not to reiterate what the first deputy just said, but we appreciate whenever we have support, especially from City Council, for retweeting and putting out the information for when we have our hiring drives. We've been working hard. We have we've changed some personnel at recruitment with the intention of just looking to reinvigorate and have some of our most dynamic folks in that unit to look to make sure that we can bring in more interested parties. So we're focused on having more people apply. So that is part of our marketing campaign, which Director Battle Murillo could speak to. But we do have a media and marketing campaign that we're working to get started. We've selected and have a contract out, but we're looking to get that started with, to speak to Councilman Thomas's point, making sure we're on social media, that we are in television and that we're attracting individuals, billboards as well. So making sure we have more people apply. And then we're looking to have applicant tracking software, within this calendar year to be able to track our folks and make more contact with them. The recruitment unit now has increased engagement, so they reach out via email to all individuals that applied to make sure that they know they are in fact in our pipeline and that we absolutely want them to join our department. So we want to get them from the application process to come out to our open house. And from there, they have to go through a physical and also a reading comprehension test. So the recruit and background unit has looked to engage and have links for individuals to practice different tests to help prepare them for the reading exam, as well as they offer dates and times to meet to help prepare them if they're struggling for the physical portion of it, so that we can get people as prepared as possible and we can get them past that. And the more applicants and then the more folks that we get through that process, ultimately the more people that we can have start our police academy. So we currently have 63 recruits in the police academy. We are looking to have an open drive again in May and another class start in June. So recruitment is definitely something that we're focused on and are looking to continually increase our numbers.
Okay, you referenced the academy. So I read a document that talked about given the restraints, so to speak, of the academy, if you were in a position to recruit, and you're saying 63, what's the capacity? Is it like 100, or the capacity of the academy?
Absolutely. We can have over 100 in there at any given time. It's just getting classes together. The last several classes have been in the 30s because we don't want to hold up a class either to wait for more candidates. So we want to be able to get people through and not have them wait. We don't want to lose them in the process. But we do have the capacity to train more.
All right. So that's not the issue, because I was told that even if we maxed out on the capacity in terms of the academy, given the attrition and given being poached by other townships, we still wouldn't keep pace with the need. So on the backside of the earlier question, what do you think we need to do to keep our police officers here once we get them? Because you got this double-edged sword. We're not getting enough coming in, and even though we do get them coming in, they're leaving, right, for different reasons.
Yeah, Council President, that's a very good question and one we've been definitely discussing amongst ourselves. One of the things we wanted to focus on that Commissioner Outlaw definitely wants to focus on is the health and wellness of the men and women who work for the department. So we want to expand our health and wellness. We have our employee assistance program. We're looking to have a more robust peer support program. And we're looking at different things that townships have that may be enticing our folks. So a lot of townships work an alternate schedule where they work 10 and 12-hour days, which gives them more time off. Policing is a stressful job. So to be able to have time away to decompress, that interests a lot of officers that we've talked to. So we recently had a study that we put out department-wide to see if there would be interest in an alternate schedule for us to pilot in a division to see how it would work. But we want to look at those types of programs to see if that would help officers, keep health and wellness and keep morale up. And that would compete with some of what the outside departments in the area are doing. It's difficult for us to compete with the salary of some of these smaller townships. They max out at like Ben Salem max out, I believe, at 137, which is far above what we max out at. But it's a smaller department. It's a different type of police department. So it's hard for us to compete with that salary, but we could compete in other ways, which is we want to make sure that we continue to showcase the things that we do have, which is the ability to move up in this department. You can test and become a supervisor in a lot of other locations. That's difficult to do. We also have a wide variety of units. So if you're interested in being a K-9 officer or working in crime scene unit or a vast variety of other locations, we have that ability here. So to make sure we sell all the things that this department does have, it's a great job. So we just want to make sure that the men and women on this job know the different things that they have available to them, as well as looking to, like I said, have a more robust health and wellness unit, and also look at things like schedule to see if that will help keep officers from looking at other departments and staying with us.
Okay. So I'm going to ask this question. I know the answer is going to be both, but with to some degree limited resources, but I always believe that if you really want to do something, you can find the money. Should we focus more on recruitment, or should we focus more on retention? Or should we try to do both equally, understanding you got a set level of resources?
I mean, honestly, I do think we can do both. I think with this new marketing strategy and the money and energy that the city's investing, I think that will really help with recruitment. And then we have to focus on health and wellness and our officers to deal with retention. So I really do believe if we focus on those areas, we also heard that we're going to have the funding to be able to do the police cadet program. And I really think that will help as well if we are able to have that program to be an in-between between our police explorers and the age you have to be just a little over 20 to be able to start the academy so that you're 21 when you graduate, to be able to have that stopgap, that time where we could have them, employed and working, and we don't lose them to another entity, whether it be a different career, a township, the military, to try to keep them. So I think these different initiatives that we're looking into executing can absolutely help with both.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy. First Deputy Stanford, can you forward to us, and I know that you all are involved in terms of camera placement across the city of Philadelphia, a grid that shows where the cameras, particularly the real-time cameras that go to the DIVIC across the city of Philadelphia. I'm just trying to get a sense. And I obviously I represent the 22nd Police District that continues to be in that top 3, unfortunately. but I don't see the level of camera deployment that I'm seeing in other parts of the city. So I'd like to see the statistics on where these cameras are deployed across the city of Philadelphia. I don't think it's like a secret. You can see they're visible. So just trying to make sure we got an equal distribution and based on crime stats and based on challenges that we have in those areas.
Yes, sir. We can provide that information. Typically, we try to look at placing cameras in the areas that mirror our pinpoint locations and pinpoint grids as to where we have some of the most violent areas. But I'll get that information to you as to the specific locations that we have. We have a total of city cameras themselves, city feeds, 1,648 city feeds that are coming in addition to SEPTA and some of our other partners, UPenn, where we have access to multiple different cameras throughout the city. But we can get that information to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to relinquish the mic. Moment. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Lozada.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your testimony. I have several questions. We have heard over the last few weeks from different people, including the district attorney. I believe it was last week or right before the break. And as you know, I mean, I think I've had the conversation with you. I've had the conversation with Commissioner Outlaw about the fact that we are losing businesses in our community as a result of retail theft. The district attorney in his testimony mentioned that part of the issues that we are experiencing is the fact that the police department isn't making arrests. That's concerning to us because places like pharmacies and small convenient stores, Family Dollars, Dollar Generals in our community are essential to community seniors, single moms, people that don't have the capacity or the ability to be able to drive from point A to point B. And many of them are leaving. That means that jobs are also leaving our community. And so can you tell us if this is accurate, right? Or is retail theft something that police ignore? If it is not, what is the number of arrests that were made as it relates to retail theft in 2022 compared to 2023? And what is I'm going to ask all of my questions now, and then you can kind of figure out how we, because they're a little bit all over the place. You guys also, in the Kensington footprint, created a strategy that you all refer to as Pinpoint. Can you give us an update on the successes and the challenges of Pinpoint, specifically in the Kensington area, in the 24th, 25th areas? And then if I still have time, and if I don't, that's fine, I can take it to the second round. But can you take me to the process of when an officer witnesses someone injecting themselves with an illegal substance, what happens? Where do you take them? Where do you go? And of course, I ask that because of the whole opioid epidemic crisis that we are experiencing in our neighborhood, right? Community residents are frustrated and concerned because these things are against the law, right? It is illegal to be in possession of an illegal substance. It is illegal to inject yourself or use an illegal substance in the community. And oftentimes the perception is that it is being ignored by officers that are within a viewing distance of the activity.
Good afternoon, ma'am. So I'll start with your retail theft question, and I'm going to shift it over to Deputy Commissioner Frank Venor. But just to give you some background, retail theft for 2022, we had 1,532 arrests, and so far for 2023, 461. But again, I'm going to let Deputy Venor get into the details as to what happens with those retail arrests in that process.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman. Just want to clear up a couple of misunderstandings I think that are out there when it comes to retail theft and what the police do. So our policy and the state statute kind of mirror each other. So when the first offense is had and it's less than $150, that turns out to be a summary offense. If there's a second offense and it's under $150, meaning the same person's arrested again for retail theft, that raises it up in the state statute and in our policy to a misdemeanor to second degree. And then it further steps up. The first or the second, if it's over 150, that then becomes a misdemeanor to first degree. And the third, or regardless of the value, is a felony of the third degree. If it involves a firearm or a motor vehicle, it's automatically a felony of the third degree. So when my detectives get a retail theft, when an officer brings someone in for retail theft, the first thing they have to do to tell if any of those things are happening is we fingerprint and photograph the person. If it turns out to be under $150 and it's a first offense, it should be a summary handed down to them. And then anything following that, we type up our arrest report to say this should be a misdemeanor. Now, what's happening on the other end is anything because of the policy that occurs now in the current administration at the DA's office, anything under $500 gets automatically sent back as a case that is downgraded to a summary. So that person, and there are examples of people that are arrested 60 plus times, if they kept it under $500, and meaning they stole something worth $200 multiple times, that's always a summary offense. And they immediately get that sent over to our booking station, they sign, and they leave the station. The frustration is some of those same people return to the same business within a few short hours and reoffend. So I know we're in a process in Center City of trying to interdict this, working with the DA's office to try to identify those prolific offenders and try to add cases together so that we could bump those gradings up to at least a misdemeanor so we could have some court jurisdiction over this. Just to give you some idea, out of the 1532 that Deputy Stanford spoke about, 74% of them in 2022 were downgraded to summary offenses. And so far this year, we've had about 461 and about 319 of them were downgraded. So that is something that's out of our hands. We cannot do anything about it. The officers are arresting when it's applicable. We are investigating and we are guided by the charging procedures that occur. I'll turn things back over to Deputy Stanford to explain what's going on in the narcotics angle.
Thank you. And so as it relates to, Operation Pinpoint, so as you know, earlier in the year, we redeployed, focusing on 4 core areas that represent 43% of the violent crime in the area. And Councilperson Lozado, as you said, the 24th and 25th district were 2 of those districts that were included in that process. So far this year, we've seen a 33% decrease in homicides in the 24th district, a 8% decrease in homicides in the 25th district. And as far as shootings, we've seen a 47% decrease in shootings in the 24th district, a 11% increase in shootings in the 25th, which again, they're slightly up, 6 more shootings than what they had this time last year. But overall, the division itself in East is down 16% in homicides, down 22% in shooting incidents, and down 27% in shooting victims. So certainly our presence there is having an impact. Again, can't have a victory parade at this point of the year, but we are confident that we're moving in a positive direction to see some of those numbers continue to drive down. As it relates to narcotics arrests in those areas as well, they're up 102% with narcotic arrests for buyers in that area and up 35% for sellers in that area. So it's a lot of work that's being done to combat the gun violence and the drug issue that's occurring, particularly in East Division as we see it right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Just one more follow-up question. In as a whole, can you tell me how many arrests as a whole in the city were made in 2022 compared to 2023? How many of them were charged, and how many declinations have there been?
Again, I'll tap to Frank. I don't know if you have that readily available in front of you, overall arrest. If not, we can get that to you.
Yeah, that's something I would have to research through our booking system and our court system, but I could certainly provide that.
I think that's important to know, right? I think we continue to hear a narrative of police is not arresting, police is present, but they're ignoring what is happening on the ground. It's important for us to be able to stop pointing the fingers. We need to come together and figure out how do we bring relief to the city, and in my case, to the community that sees you all there, but that don't believe that the work is happening. And so I'd like to know how are the arrests, how many arrests are happening in my district compared to other neighborhoods? And if you guys are doing the work, then how many of those arrests are being declined when they get to the charging unit?
We will get that information for you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And just to follow up on your other question regarding if someone is utilizing narcotics when we arrive, and again, it can go in two directions. Either we will call for a medic unit as that person may be in need of some type of medical attention, and the other would be arrest. And so I'm told that if the needle itself is the only narcotics that they have on them, then the process that we are being faced with at this point is that the contents of the needle have to be tested prior to them being charged with anything. If they are in possession of other narcotics, then they will be processed in the regular way in terms of as a narcotics possession. So just to give you that answer as well.
Yeah, but I think we need to figure out how we bring common sense back into the game, right? You know that if you're sitting on Kensington Avenue, you're sitting on the step, or you're sitting at the train station where there are another 60 or 70 people leaning over, they're not injecting anything else other than an illegal substance. And so how do we figure this out? We have to do something different than what we've done in the past. The Kensington Harrogate community deserved that. And we need to continue to fight and push for it. And I know that it's frustrating, but we're going to have to continue to ask those questions until someone understands that there has to be a different process and that we have to work together as public safety and representatives of people.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Deputy, before I call on Councilwoman Vaughn, do you have those similar statistics for the 22nd? You referenced it 24th and 25th in terms of reduction?
I do. In terms of, I have it here. 22nd district being one of the pinpoint areas that we've done some extensive focus on. As far as homicides, we're down 11% in the 22nd district, and shootings down 18%. So again, that has been one of the four places that we have put some additional resources and have put some additional focus in trying to combat some of the gun violence. And so again, too early to celebrate, and still too many lives being lost and too many lives being impacted to even begin to have that mindset. But it's just a matter of, again, we see that we're moving in a positive direction, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Vaughn.
Good afternoon.
Councilwoman.
I apologize, Councilmember Vaughn. I'm willing to acquiesce to Councilmember Vaughn, but I was first in the queue for PPD. So if I could be recognized after Councilmember Vaughn.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. Wasn't my fault, but no. All right, we'll correct that. Councilwoman Vaughn.
Oh, am I on?
You want?
Or
yeah.
okay,
yeah,
okay.
Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson,
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. As you all know, Jimmy, Lozada, and myself are very much interested in what's going to happen with this opioid situation. But my question is, who is responsible to remove or assume custody of a homeless person who poses a threat to themselves or others? My office recently had to deal with a constituent in West Philadelphia who was reported to be homeless and living across the street on a vacant property on the porch. He is defecating on the property, urinating in empty bottles and throwing them around the neighborhood, which of course is causing a horrendous smell on the block. This is going to get worse as it gets warmer, and they have called the police and reported him to 311 on numerous occasions, only to be told there is nothing that they can do about it. The man's brother lives on the block and threw him out because of his behavior, but because no one can enforce him to get help, he continues to stay around the neighborhood, which is causing a lot of frustration for the neighbors when he tries to get rid of his feces and things like that. We just need to be able to tell this person that some relief is on the way and where it is coming from.
Good afternoon, ma'am. We implemented a behavioral health unit the end of last year. We were working in that, and you have Chief Inspector Mike Cram is on, who has been very instrumental in putting together that unit and working tirelessly to get it off the ground earlier this year. And so I'm going to flip it over to him to give some background information on some of those type of incidents that they have already experienced and what they have done. Chief Cram.
Thank you, sir. And good afternoon, Council. Chief Inspector Mike Cram. I'm with our Special Operations Bureau. So we started the Behavioral Health Unit about a little over 2 years ago. Started out as a pilot program in East Division. And basically what it did is it partnered police officers and mental health clinicians in a car. We expanded it in December where it became a formalized unit. So now for the day where we started small, right? It's still kind of an experimental mode. We started in December, and we have 4 teams generally out there on day work patrol, consisting of 2 police officers and a mental health clinician. And they're also follow-up teams, too. So while we'll do the initial engagement through our partners at Meraki, Elwyn, and Department of Behavioral Health, then we'll send follow teams up to make sure that the individual's getting treatment. On top of that, we also expanded the police-assisted diversion, which was real small in East Division. It just went city-wide as last week. So for cases like this, Councilwoman, if you just give me the address, what I'll do is I'll send a behavioral health team out there. They'll make contact with the man and work on getting help for him. We just did one up in Alny on Monday. It was a tip we got on Sunday, and by Monday morning, we'd already gotten the individual into some treatment. And the best part about this is we do the follow-up, right? So it's just not a fire and forget thing. It's these teams will constantly stay in contact with the individual, help him, help the family, you name it. It's like one-stop shopping with our partners. So if you can just throw it in the chat, and I will or email it to me, and I will take care of that.
Thank you.
Just
and that would
overall,
be
just in these short couple of months that they've been in existence, a little over 90 days, already 276 contacts where they're helping people get into treatment, and it should just get into services, get into drug and alcohol treatment. So it's been a really great endeavor. Yes.
All right. Just give me your email address.
I will, ma'am. I'll throw it in the chat.
Okay.
If that's okay.
I don't think we can put information in the chat. Just
I'll email you directly then.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And pending any further questions, I'm on here if you need me, sir.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you.
No problem.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson. Sorry, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Council President. And
multitasking
thank
in
you.
here.
Oh, no problem. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you, First Deputy Stanford, for your work. I remember working with you back to your 19th district days when you were our captain in the 19th. And just thank you to your team, particularly, and I'm not going to name names, but particularly Dale's, who has really worked very closely with us over the last 3 years on a number of initiatives. I really don't know what I would personally do without Dale, so I have to give him a special shout out. and also to the old captains, and welcome all the new captains, but particularly in the 17th, the 19th, and the 22nd, because I was able to do ride-alongs in those areas between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., and they were certainly very, very helpful for some of the legislation that I've worked on. You all know that I care deeply about the enforcement around the drug paraphernalia stores that have popped up in the city, and I have several questions regarding those locations and how we can better sort of rearrange staffing to ensure that the police department has a complement as a part of the nuisance business task force. But in addition to that, I wanted to talk about the curfew. Now, recognizing some of the incidents that we faced over the last couple weeks did not happen during the time of the curfews. I want to be very clear that I am aware of that and I recognize that. But I am getting inundated with calls, social media posts, text messages, people stopping me in the street regarding curfew enforcement in the city of Philadelphia. So I wanted to know if you could talk about what the police department's overall strategy is that you can publicly discuss relative to curfew enforcement. How are you all enforcing the curfew? How are you all collaborating with DHS and with the community evening resource centers to sort of take a preventative approach to curfew enforcement? How are you all training the police officers to interact with young people? And what is the plan from your department's perspective to address the typical uptick of sort of, I'll call it nuisance behaviors that we see when school is out for the summer, and particularly around those incidents that we saw over the last couple of weeks? Because we do have a remedy in place. There's 4 CERC centers open in 4 different police divisions, with 2 additional centers slated to open in the last 2 police divisions. So I really want to focus in and hone in on curfew specifically, and if you could give us data and information on this hearing regarding the enforcement.
Good afternoon, ma'am. So for curfews for 2022, first, thank you for acknowledging our personnel and the work that they're doing is greatly appreciated. As it relates to 2022 with our curfews, we were 2,174 for the city, which was 177% increase from 2021. And then so far this year, we're at 535 curfews, which is up 2% from this time last year. So it's definitely something that we are continuing to enforce and to instruct our men and women when curfews apply to enforce that. Even so much as now with the increase in some of the centers, that gives us the ability to be able to have an additional resource available, as opposed to if their parents are not available, or if we aren't able to transport them home, or if no one is home, it gives us the ability to now take them someplace that's safe and that would offer the resources that and many times many of the young people need. As it relates to what we're trying to do, we've met with the DA's office around juveniles. We've met with Deputy Mayor Vanessa Garrett Harley and her team a few weeks ago, and we will again be looking to do some additional meetings. My office reached out to NOMO and Yay Philly in order to again bring in the juvenile perspective. Something sometimes that's often left out when we as city officials try to bring resolutions to some of these issues. Sometimes we forget the people that are a part of the issue in itself. And so that's going to be an effort to bring them to the table, as well as getting out the information around our police athletic leagues, the Explorers program. We just did the summer kickoff, for the city, highlighting all of those different resources. And you brought up a point on the first session that was really good, in the sense of making sure that we are aware, and not just that the public is aware, but that we as police officials and as city government employees are aware of all of the resources that we have available in our city. And so as a part of that push, we will be inviting Deputy Mayor Garrett Harley and her team to a meeting with our commanders, so that our commanders know what these programs are, how they're offered, and so that information can be pushed down to their lieutenants, sergeants, and officers that are out on the street. And so that's just some of the things that we're working to do. We're also looking at overall, again, when you look at the city, you have as far as juveniles and youth, about 350,000 juveniles in this city. And in that age group that we see some of the issues is usually between that 12 and 17 years of age, which makes up about 117,000 young people. And so when you get down to this, looking at when we have 200, 300, 400 juveniles collectively at any park throughout our city, you're really less than 0.5%, really less than a 0.25% of all the juveniles in that age group are in a location and perhaps getting involved in activity they shouldn't be. The question is, are they involved in engaged in criminal activity, or are they involved in this nuisance behavior? And so for us, it's identifying the difference between the two, as well as looking at, again, those individuals that are part of violent crime. That's the issue that we need to use a forceful hand in terms of being able to have a firm hand, not forceful, but a firm hand of being able to collaborate with our juvenile enforcement team, working with the probation department, seeing if there are any additional warrants that are pending, those type of things to ensure that we're getting the kids off the street that are involved in the carjackings, the shootings. That's one issue. The kids that are need some place to go, need something to do. Well, that's another issue. And to me, addressing those issues are very different. And so many of those kids is making sure that they have the resources and are aware of them. And then if there's a situation where we assist to get them there, then we will. There also, at some point, we probably need to have more of a conversation as to police's involvement and role, because the fear that often places among our men and women is engaging some of these young people, right? And having a situation go bad as a result of a curfew. And so I think it's having more of that conversation as to what is the long-term strategy and policy for not just this department, but this city as it relates to juveniles. I think is key, especially in this time where, so many things happen in an instance, and it's not intended to be that way. But the outcome still can be very bad, right? And so I think we're trying to still enforce curfews where we can, but also being mindful that, sometimes it may not be the easiest of processes when you involve juveniles in some of our officers. And so we are trying to increase training in that area of dealing with juveniles just to make that process a little smoother.
Okay, well, I appreciate the response. I just want to be very clear that with the recent staffing changes that have occurred, my team has sent out a letter to every single new captain and those that remain regarding the community evening resource centers, so we can get the word out, because we know young people can go there voluntarily and some will go there involuntarily if they're in violation of the curfew. But I do think, to your point, it's important to talk to the other organizations, like you mentioned, NOMO and GIA Philly, and if it's an opportunity for us to support organizations like that to sort of maybe expand their hours so that they could also take in the young people. I think we need to sort of be aware of the folks that you all partner with in certain divisions so that we understand how to resource that work, because they could be another spot in addition to a PAL center or a rec center or a CERC center to take a young person. The difference with the CERC center is that there's transportation to take the young people home, and they're open until 2 a.m. And so I really want to underscore the fact that we will now have 6, because the complaint we heard last year, the year before, was that you don't have a CERC center at every single division, so we can't expect an officer, to come down from, let's just say, the 35th all the way down to the 19th or the 18th, right? So now we've addressed that issue. We'll have 6 up and running, 1 at every single police division, so it's not far. But I just need to understand sort of the commitment around the enforcement of this and ensuring that the young people get there. I'm going to honor the clock, and I'll circle back on round 2 relative to the drug paraphernalia stores and the nuisance business task force. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gaudier.
Thank you, Council President. I have some questions around forensics. Several months ago, under the leadership of Majority Leader Jones, several of us went to visit the city's forensics lab and to learn about what happens there on a day-to-day basis. And it was really fascinating to understand what happens at the lab, and also to hear about how, we have an esteemed and a highly skilled operation nationally, but it also came through really clearly that we don't have the capacity that we need. And I could be misremembering, but I think it was said that we're able to handle, we have about a third of the capacity that we would really need in terms of being able to bring, forensics technology to our ability to clear clear more of these cases. And so regarding the improvements to be made to the Office of Forensic Science, can you detail the timeline for the opening of the new forensics lab, the hiring, as well as the hiring of the 49 budgeted civilian positions within the Office of Forensic Science? And can you talk about how the proposed allocation for FY24 will decrease the current forensic backlog and help us to clear more cases in the city?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. I am going to call on Director Mike Garvey, as he has been working, again, tirelessly to try to move all of those things forward with the Office of Forensic Science. So, Mike, jump right on in, please.
Absolutely, sir. Great questions, and you were spot on with everything you learned during our tour. We are currently about 1/3 of the size that we need based on the volume coming in. We are one of the most high-end labs in our country in terms of the volume of cases we put out. So the question obviously is clearly, how do we meet the need that's coming in? We are currently working with public property right now. Hopefully within the next several weeks, they will put out the RFP for the new building. Based on the responses to that RFP, we will know what type of building are they going to choose. Will it be one that we're going to build ground up? Is it going to be one that we're going to move into? Once we know that answer, then we'll actually be able to answer the other question, which is how long will this take? Obviously, if it's something that we can move into faster, we get in more quickly. If it's something we have to build ground up, that's going to take more time. However, what we are doing with some of the $25 million grant, not only are we doing the 48 hires right now, actively hiring right now, because we have that room in our current building. So we have been posting several jobs over the last couple months. We will continue over the next several months doing two things. One, try to get qualified forensic scientists from another laboratory to move here. That's a bigger challenge, but that's the preferable one, because then we don't have to spend 1 to 2 years training the person to be an expert. Where we cannot hire someone who's already qualified, we will be hiring new trainees, people right out of college who will take about a year or two to train. What we are looking at is, as we're hiring the people that we can fit in here, is how do we make the best use of that $25 million grant, which is planning for an extra 100 to 120 new people once we get into the new building. We obviously have to balance people and space, but we are looking at plans knowing that our training program takes 1 to 2 years. Can we find space where we can begin to hire those extra 100 people, put them through the training program, so that when we're closer to the new building, we would be able to move in and not have to start from scratch then? So those are the current plans. Where we're at, we will know much more once the RFP goes out. In terms of what else we are doing is, wherever we can, we're buying technologies that make us be able to speed up our processes. So in some cases where you saw DNA testing, where people have to manually transfer DNA from one tube to the next, some of the money from, I believe it was FY23, was used to buy automation, where rather than a person doing it, we buy an instrument that can transfer things from hundreds of tubes rather than someone doing it one at a time. All of this goes towards the idea of, as we can work cases as they come in, we produce leads faster, and the more leads we produce, the more cases we close, and hopefully closing cases before the person commits their third, fourth, fifth crime. Hopefully I answered all parts of your question. I'm sorry if
Thank you.
I
Just
missed
two
anything.
follow-ups. When you say that we're going to look for people in forensic science from other parts of the country, are there particular areas that we would be looking in because they tend to have more highly skilled people? And then secondly, I know it might be hard to do, but is there any way to make a prediction on if we are able to expand our capacity, how it would lend to our ability an increase in closed cases?
Sure. So part one is we are basically, when we advertise now, we're working with human resources to do things that we previously may not have done, which is advertise this across the whole country to every crime lab in the country, basically targeting people that may want to move to this general area. If you're in a laboratory right now and you're a good employee, we absolutely want you here now so that we can get our cases work. So we are actively looking at not just regional, we are targeting them, of course, but across the whole country. In terms of what will this do for closing cases? Well, what basically we can already see over the last 5 years as we've been trying to increase what's the capacity that we can work, what we've seen is every time we increase the number of cases that we're able to analyze, we increase other things, such as people, which I also have to bring up, someone that may have been excluded. We exclude people earlier. So people that did not do a crime are excluded earlier. But we also see leads for these cases increase. With every productivity we do, the leads increase even more. So this will just keep going if we can work evidence as it comes in.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Let me take a couple moments before I start. Just to, first of all, I want to wish Commissioner Outlaw a healthy recovery. We know she was in an accident, and our condolences are with her. And I just want to wish her the best, especially getting hurt in the line of duty. I also want to just take a minute to thank, of course, Inspector Haley, who was the person that worked with us throughout the course of the driving equality work. Captain Massey, who's my captain in the 35th Police District. Deputy Commissioner Dales, who I probably call every time I don't have an answer to a question. And then I also want to thank, and if I'm wrong in the title, I do apologize, Deputy Commissioner Kelly, who actually joined a very important call that we had earlier this week as it relates to school safety. One of the things that we talked about was bringing together school police, SEPTA, the school district, the school board, along with my office, to talk about what can we do to figure out how can we keep young people safe on the way to school between the hours of 7:30 and about 9, as well as on the way from home from school between the hours of 3 and 5, because we know that as the weather breaks and as we see crime decreasing in every age besides our children, we have to be proactive and innovative as it relates to solutions. So I just want to thank all of those folks involved in the police department for working with my office on a number of different issues, and just to let you know that you are very much appreciated. I have a couple questions, and I'm hoping to get them all in this round. My first question is around driving equality. I mentioned Inspector Haley earlier. We were privileged enough to have a working group to come up with the legislation, and one of the things that came with the driving equality legislation was legislation that required some level of data to be reported based on traffic stops. When we last spoke, that data was not, the technology that was needed to communicate that data was not yet available. I'm wondering, where are we with the technology that's needed to be purchased in order to report the data that the driving equality legislation requires.
Oh, Davis office.
Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for acknowledging, our folks for the work they're doing. I'm going to turn this over to Inspector Haley, so that he can give you the update as to where we are with that.
But
Councilmember Jones, you got to mute. Councilmember Jones, you got to mute yourself. Inspector, I'm sorry.
No problem, sir. Thank you, Councilman. You're correct. The issue is the overlay between the driving equality bill as well as the requirements under the Bailey settlement agreement. We all capture the same data. The driving equality bill required us to capture some additional data. When we first wanted to do this, we were looking to revamp the entire Bailey database, which is called our 7548A database. And it's really what we want to do in the long run. But what we couldn't do with the existing data management system we have now, it could not absorb the intensity or the breadth of our existing 48A system. So what we did is we made the tweaks that were necessary to accommodate the driving equality bill, and they were put in place in January of this year. So the data capturing the differentiation between the primary, secondary, as well as the type of contraband that's recovered on stops is now in the database. So what I'll do is I'll go back since January. We don't have a lot of data except only from January, but I'll pull what we have and I'll share that with you. And moving forward, we'll share it on a more regular basis. And what we're looking to do is make sure that the Open Philly data that has all the car stop data is updated to include those additional new fields that were required as a result of your bill. So we are collecting the data now. The system was updated. We still need to do an overhaul, a larger overhaul, but we didn't want to delay capturing the information required under your ordinance. So it's now out there within the 48A system, and the officers are required to push in the information as it stands right now.
That's amazing. Thank you, Inspector Haley. We appreciate it. That's great news. Let me move on to hopefully more good news. We have discussed in other budget hearings the technology that's needed for hit and runs, and we are aware that you now have that technology. Is there any data that we can report now that we have that technology? When we first looked at hit and runs, the data was alarming as it relates to the arrest rate, charge rate, things of that capacity. Now that we have this new technology, is there any data that we can point to be able to show the improvements that we've seen in our ability to solve hit and runs based on the technology we now have?
Yes, sir. I believe we'll call in Deputy Venor, who oversees the crash investigation division.
Sure. So thank you, Councilman. Back when Captain Overwise testified about that technology that we wanted to buy, we did purchase it. It cost over $73,000. And last December, all the members of Crash Investigation were trained on the technology. Now, that is a focused laser scanner. It does 2D, 3D crime scenes. It helps us depict exactly what happened in the crash, and it helps them in their investigation. It helps them when they collect video, what angles the cars were at. And just so you know, last year alone, there were 35 hit and run deaths in Philadelphia, and that's 28% of all our fatal crashes. That's up from 21 and 2020. In 21, it was 16%. In 2020, it was 20%. So we're constantly trying to solve these cases. Our solve rate is going over 35% right now. They continue to work last year's cases. We often offer a reward in many of those cases with the help of the managing director to try to get tips and figure out not only the car involved, but who was operating that car so we can make an arrest.
I thought that's look at this. More good news. That's good to hear. Thank you. Very much appreciated. Let me move into the next phase of my questions. Let's talk about the homicide clearance rate. Clearly, we have significant issues as it relates to homicides, and our clearance rate isn't necessarily where we want it to be. Communicate to us what our clearance rate is currently as it relates to homicides, and talk to us a little bit about what is the plan outside of forensics. I know we're investing significantly in forensics. I know we're down a lot of police officers, so I'm sure that that's part of some of the issues that we're facing as it relates to our homicide clearance rate. But where are we as it relates to those numbers, and what support systems do you need?
So again, I'll bring in Deputy Venor here, but just so you know, in terms of year to date, our clearance rate is 64%, which is up from 48% for this same time last year. Yes, up significantly. And so Deputy Venor can speak to some of the work that our homicide investigators are doing to get some of those clearances. But it is trending in a good direction, and we hope to continue that process. Deputy Venor.
Yes. So, Councilman, in early 2022, the police commissioner created the shooting investigation group. They handle all the non-fatal shootings. They co-locate with homicide. So now we got a very large group. It's almost 200 people down in that room who work really an intelligent-led investigative process. So, and that process is really helping us not only in homicides, but in our non-fatal shootings. A lot of what we're doing, and you've seen it in the media, in cases like the that were highly publicized, but we do it all the time. In the Roxborough case, in the case of the homicide along South Street, we're not only using forensics, and we're not only using our ballistic, our NIBIN technology, we're using all the other technologies that we have available to us that we could delve into, video, cell phone technology, and we're putting that together in an investigative process to really, in some cases, replace the witness. The witness is no longer, it'd be great to have somebody push us in the right direction. In many cases, we get a tip, but for the DA to prosecute these cases, he's got to have that case solid, whether that witness is available or not. And in many times, the way these young investigators are investigating, using technology, using forensics to corroborate everything we have, I think it's helping us increase the clearance rate. It's helping our speed of our investigations because, as you know, it's not like TV. I mean, the forensics, even though Director Garvey said we're pulling it very quickly, it doesn't happen over the course of the commercial like it does on TV. It takes time and it takes a lot of people hours. The men and women in homicide do everything they can to get to that evidence quickly, submit it so that we could push the investigations forward.
Thank you. I do have three more questions. Council President, you want me to save it for a second round? I think I heard the bell. I'm not sure. Well, if I don't hear anything, let me jump into the fake tag issues. There are a lot of issues that we're seeing as it relates to the fake tags. That's what I heard that bell. Get this question in real quick, and then I'll wait until the next round for the other two. Fake tags, fake license plates, a lot as it relates to that. I'm wondering where we are with addressing the fake license plates. There's no secret that we talk to elected officials up and down the East Coast. We're not the only city that's dealing with the fake license plate, fake tag issue. I'm wondering where are we with that? I know you guys don't have the license plate scanners. I think at one time we were told that it was only, I don't want to give numbers out, but it wasn't an adequate number. So what's the plan and what are we doing around fake tags, and what resources do you need from City Council to aggressively address the fake tag crisis that we're facing, not just in Philadelphia, but up and down the East Coast? And then I'll cue in for a second round.
So again, Deputy Venor, I don't know if you want to jump in and provide some of the work that Major Crimes is doing around some of those issues. You certainly can.
Sure. Our Major Crimes Auto Squad, which is really funded by the insurance companies that put together a grant each year, they do everything they can to not only find and cite these individuals, but also if they have a fake tag, train the officers within patrol through their auto squad. They put out periodic patrol alerts showing them what the tags look like, and that if they spot this particular tag, it's not legitimate. So it's very difficult because some of them are very good and they would fool the average person. But we do everything we can to not only educate, but identify them. And they're a plainclothes unit. They're out on the street constantly. I hear them when I'm on my way to work in the very early hours of the morning, 6, 7 o'clock. And they're finding those vehicles and identifying them very quickly.
I'll come back for a second round question just around specific number of arrests and things like that related to fake tags. Thank you, Council President. Thank you, colleagues.
Clerk recognizes Councilman Jones. If not Councilman Jones, Councilman Harity.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Oh. Can you hear me?
I hear you, Councilman.
Okay, good. My first question, hello, Deputy Chief, how are you? My first question is, what other recruitment methods is the department using to increase staffing levels? How does officers' pay compare with other cities? And does the department offer any kind of bonuses for new hires?
Good afternoon again, Councilman. Before I pitch it over to Deputy Dow Campbell, we do offer a signing bonus of $2,000 to new recruits. And again, I'll let her get into some of the efforts that we are moving forward with as it relates to recruitment, and even so much as what we've seen around the country, comparing some of the dollar amounts that are being offered in terms of pay and benefits and things of that nature. Deputy Dow Campbell.
Good afternoon, Councilman. Yes, the recruitment unit is looking to engage. Obviously, social media is a big factor. So we've been reaching targeted zip codes and areas that we haven't had the highest number of applicants come from. So we're trying to reach out to those zip codes more through Facebook ads, Twitter, and getting more traction in social media, as well as we're going to be starting very shortly a professional LinkedIn just to attract those individuals as well. The recruitment unit has made 4 visits just this fiscal year at HBCU, college visits. And we've had increased engagement with applicants, just making sure we have more touch points with them to keep them engaged in our process and bring them on. And in terms of your question on how we relate nationally, salary-wise, when it comes to other major cities, we're very close. We're around the same as NYPD, LAPD, Dallas. So we're very similar in salary to other large cities. Now, local townships, our salary is under theirs. So when we see officers leaving to go to, Westchester or Hatfield or Abington, some of those salaries are, in fact, higher than ours. But nationally, other large departments, we do have a similar salary.
Yeah, I'm just concerned with these other big cities trying to poach our prospective applicants. I don't know if any of you have seen the billboards on 95 that say become a Miami police officer, starting salary of $79,000 a year, live on the beach, $20,000 signing bonus. And we start out in the academy at about 59.
Yes.
They're starting at 79, and they're also given a $20,000 signing bonus. I just don't know how we compete with that by giving $2,000 signing bonuses. I mean, it's a great start, and I'm glad to see that we're doing something to try to make it happen. Like to see some of those salaries increase, and would be happy to talk to you guys about how we make that happen. Like to stay competitive and keep people in the city of Philadelphia, especially our police officers, because there's a lot of people in Philadelphia that don't really feel safe anymore, and we need to try to get a handle on that. So I appreciate that. In what areas can the department use civilian employees other than analysts, particularly in outreach and intervention groups?
So, I don't know if the first deputy wants to take this to.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So So in terms of civilian personnel, in terms of we are looking at that within the department, obviously, and I can tap CSO Norton to explain a little bit more as to the award around civilian personnel, what we can hire, what we have the ability to hire. But we are assessing throughout the department what places, units where we could utilize professional staff to fill some of those positions or to build out some of those positions where we don't necessarily have to use our resources in the form of uniformed personnel. And so that's something we are looking at. But again, if CSO Norton is on, she can jump in and provide any additional information.
Thank you very much, First Deputy Stanford. I'm happy to talk a little bit about the recent FOP award that we worked through the collective bargaining process last year. In December of 2021 and April 2022, the city had notified the FOP of its intent to engage in non-bargaining unit personnel to perform work that had been previously performed by FOP bargaining unit members. We prepared a series of jobs that we thought would be acceptable to the FOP in terms of adding civilian workforce, not replacing officers. And we convened a panel in August 25th of 2022 to do an interest arbitration hearing. And we won the award on 11/15/2022. And so what the award allowed us to do was hire certain staff positions with employees that were civilian that could work alongside FOP collective bargaining members. We could free up officers to focus on more public safety tasks. And the arbitration allowed us to add civilians, but to not transfer sworn personnel out of the units. The positions that we looked at that were awarded in this collective bargaining process were the body-worn camera technicians, forensic positions that Director Garvey specifically. We also looked at the graphic arts department and audio visual in the PPD that's run out of our organizational communications. And Director Garvey, can I point to you to talk a little bit about the positions that you're currently hiring for that are resulted under this award?
Absolutely. So basically, when you look at some of the challenges we've had, right, when we're talking about jobs that we cannot fill, for great example, crime scene unit. Typically, crime scene works every homicide scene we have. It normally has about 32 people to process scenes, 365 days per year. As of the end of last year, we were down to about 15, half of the unit. But crime scene unit was traditionally a fully sworn unit. Now, do you need to be sworn to process a crime scene? No, it does not mean that those people are doing the work the wrong way. They're actually doing a very great job. However, when we have shortages everywhere, we couldn't transfer people in. But what we do know is you don't have to be sworn to process crime scenes. So we're now in the process of hiring people that will come in, that will have the right training to process crime scenes. That way we can keep sworn officers doing roles that only they can do, and we can fill jobs that otherwise were going just empty for way too long.
Thank you. That was great. Appreciate that.
Are you done, Member Harity?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Lozada, you are up next.
Yes, I just have a really quick follow-up question. We just spoke a little bit about the shortages. I know that in, I think every budget cycle, the question about IOD is asked. My question is, the last time we spoke, or the last budget hearings, Commissioner Outlaw spoke a little bit about IOD and getting it under control. Figuring out who was abusing it and who wasn't, who really needed to be out on IOD. Can you tell me where we are as it relates to the number of officers that are on IOD, how it impacts police services and the 911 response? And before you do that, I'd also like to just send my prayers to Commissioner Outlaw and pray for her quick recovery.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So in terms of IOD, we're actually seeing a little bit of a reduction in those numbers. And so that's a good sign that we have officers that are returning to work. This time last year, we were close to 600 officers being out in IOD status. At this point, we're around 378. So again, not the greatest, but the numbers are starting to go down. And each month, we've kind of seen that reducing. And so that is a good sign. In terms of the impact, it absolutely has an impact on policing. And so we look at the men and women that are out there coming to work each and every day. This affects them, right, in terms of the pressures that are on them to do even more so because they have fellow officers that aren't at work. And again, that doesn't mean that everybody that is in IOD status is abusing it, but we have seen in the past where there are some individuals that have abused that. And so we constantly work on terms of trying to manage that. But obviously, yes, that getting more officers back will definitely help as it relates to our response, as it relates to having additional staffing available to us out on the street, particularly in patrol. And so that's why we've made some of the adjustments with some of our administrative personnel, putting them out on the street in terms of trying to beef up the numbers to support not only the communities, but also our men and women that are here every day and that are answering the calls. And so, again, we are very mindful of that. We do what we can within our power as it relates to that.
And so what I'm hearing is that there are mechanisms in place now that prevent the abuse of IOD.
I'm not going to say that can prevent it completely. There are still people that are going to find, the loopholes in the areas to abuse anything in life, right? And so, but we do have, mechanisms that we try to enforce in terms of ensuring that folks are returning back from their appointments, submitting the paperwork in a timely fashion so that we can make sure that stuff is being updated. If there's an indication that someone is, committing a false claim or a fake injury, so to speak, then we, again, work through either internal affairs where we need to, as well as the city agencies to again, risk management in order to ensure that we are addressing that. So, yes, we are utilizing the mechanisms that are in place. Again, I would love to say, with 100% certainty we're able to stop it, but that's just not realistic, unfortunately.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Thank you, Member Lozada. Chair recognizes Member Bass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So let me first start out by saying a big thank you to you and all of your colleagues at the Philadelphia Police Department for the hard work that you do. I want to give a particular shout out to those that I work with on a regular basis up here in the Northwest, and that is Inspector Nick Smith and my captains Massey, Boosie, and Richardson from the 14th, 35th, and 39th districts, who all do a fantastic job. And also the community relationships officers. I really shouldn't name names because I know I'm going to forget someone, but I really wanted to say I thank you for being so responsive and for the great relationship that we've cultivated over the years. And I think that There's more of that to come. We've worked so hard to improve community relations with the Philadelphia Police Department in a lot of neighborhoods that are challenging. And so, we can only accomplish that by working together. So I just really wanted to say thank you for that. Really quickly, because a lot of what I wanted to ask has already been covered, but I did want to go back to what was mentioned earlier around the crime scene unit, and that I wanted to make sure I had those numbers right, that there were normally 35 members of the unit, and that they were now down to about 15. Is that accurate? Is that what I heard?
So again, I'll Mike Garvey, that's what you presented, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, and so that unit covers things such as homicides and other major crimes, correct? Such as carjackings and things of that sort?
So yes, they do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, and when we're thinking about how do we get back to that number, I know obviously it's a personnel matter, and I heard you mention that, steps were being taken so that people don't have to be certified to be in the crime scene unit. But I guess I'm wondering also beyond that, are there additional needs that are needed for the crime scene unit? Because I think most people's concerns are around the major crimes, homicides, carjackings, things like that. So are there other needs that beyond personnel that maybe we should highlight here?
So just before I turn it over to Mike, I just want to also just bring a little clarification in the sense that that's the crime scene unit. Our investigators are also trained in processing scenes that cover the gamut of crime. Even so much as we have officers that also know how to conduct a level of print training and things of those nature. So if someone has a residential burglary, we have officers that can respond, that are out on the street, that can pull latent prints and things of that nature. So again, I just wanted to bring clarity that although the unit itself has seen a decrease in staff, we still have the ability across the board to process those crimes outside of the homicides and shootings. But I'll turn it over to Mike if you want to add anything additional.
That was actually one of the points that I was going to add in. So we obviously do training so that others can process scenes. In terms of what else does the crime scene unit need other than the people that we are currently hiring? The actual crime scene posting closed about a week past. So we should be seeing people come in for a test, and then we will move forward with hiring people. The other thing that we're doing with $23 is purchasing a new larger crime scene truck. We have crime scene trucks for your normal crime scenes. But what we're seeing, and with the new technologies we are bringing in, crime scenes are getting more complicated. So one of the things that we're going to be purchasing is a larger crime scene truck that will only go out to major scenes where there's multiple casings or multiple scenes, so that some of the processing can be done outside at the scene, but this will be a truck that will actually be able to go into to do some of the prep work to speed up that process for when we're doing the collection at the scene to get the evidence back here to be analyzed. The other thing that was already purchased is something that we call a crime pad. This is technology helping us do our job. Rather than taking handwritten notes, we're in the process right now of bringing online a crime pad where crime scene will be able to enter the evidence into the crime pad. It will sync back here so that we will know what evidence is coming in, what needs to be analyzed. So all of a sudden, again, working smarter rather than harder.
Right.
And then the final thing, of course, gets back to what I always talk about is the new building. One of the things we're looking into, again, waiting for an RFP, seeing how much everything will cost, whether we would be able to do it. But one of the essential things that we would like to add to crime scene is a capability to have a proper space to process cars, trucks. So right now, when a car gets, whether there's blood on it, whether there's holes in it, and it has to be processed for prints and other things like that. We don't have a controlled area to process that. If possible, in the new site, we would have a proper area to process all of these cars.
What new site would that be? Is that
That would be the new site that we're working with public property to put out an RFP, and then move everything we have here into a new, larger place, which right now I can't tell you where it will be because we're waiting for the RFP.
Okay. We don't, you know, it's funny. I thought we had enough space for everything at Callahell. Or somebody sold us a Brooklyn Bridge. Okay, well, listen. Okay, well, I think that that's really important to make sure we have a space to process automobiles. But I did have one other question, just going backwards to something you said about crime scenes being more complicated. And is that when you say more complicated? You know, and I'm not trying to be a detective or do police work, but I guess I don't really understand why it is more complicated unless it's a confluence of different things that are happening that weren't happening in the past, and like, why is it more complicated?
Sure. So great question. It's really more complicated for a couple of reasons. One, we're seeing more fire cartridge cases than we've ever had before. There's more shootings, but not just that there's more shootings, people are shooting more. So what we're seeing is a lot more fire cartridge cases than what we previously had. That's one reason, but quite frankly, that wouldn't make the scene so much more complicated, right? It would just make it more, there's more there to process. What's really made scenes more complicated is every time we advance the technology and it works, then people expect it and want it more, and we want to do it because we could potentially solve more cases. So when we start thinking 10 years ago what we would have collected DNA from, it wouldn't have been that many items other than the blood stains and other things like that. But today, we consider numerous items that we would have never considered before. So now, all of a sudden, how you process that scene, how you handle the items, how you package the items, which items you would collect today that you wouldn't previously is more complicated because the science permits us to answer more of the questions.
Got it. And Mr. Chairman, I know that the bell is rung, but can I ask one more? I think I'm the last one. If I could just ask one other question, and that is that as you're processing these crime scenes, and I don't know if this question was already asked, but one of the things I noticed is that all of the surrounding counties are now starting to think about using some sort of a bullet analysis. And that's something our office had been working on for quite some time. And I know we spoke to some officials within the Philadelphia Police Department about that. Are we looking at bullet analysis as well as our suburban counterparts are?
So I'm pretty sure I'm clear on the general technologies you're talking about. We've been using more testing for crime guns than any of the counties anywhere near us. We've actually had people come in from all over the country to see how we process crime guns and the evidence at scenes. So we are using the current capabilities and even more capabilities that many people have right now for any of that crime gun evidence to try to link that gun to various shootings, but not only link the shootings to the same gun, but now also link people to the evidence.
Yes.
So absolutely yes.
Okay. That's something that our office had been working on and looking at and trying to figure out for quite some time. And we know it's very complicated, and we know that there are gun enthusiasts who feel like it could be somewhat of a violation. But I think it would give the police department a head start, or even a starting point, if you consider a bullet that's shot through a gun to be almost like a fingerprint. So because each one is as individual as a fingerprint. And so knowing that that likely that information and that data exists somewhere. Trying to find a way to incorporate it into processing these crime scenes and what needs to happen to solve crimes. I just think is something that, as we develop our technology, as we look to get, some of the bigger crime scene analysis vehicles that'll come out and process on site, that's something that we're going to incorporate. And the only other thing I just wanted to add, Mr. Chairman, is that I wanted to also thank the department and particularly Deputy Commissioner Dales for being such a resource when it comes to our anti-crime, anti-violence initiative, which is around ensuring that we're checking what's in the possession of the young people in our home. We have a phrase that we've coined called, "What do you do when the shooter lives with you?" And, I see Councilmember Jones's head nodding, and I'm going to say when we go out and we talk about this, we get a lot of those same reactions. We get a lot of head nods, and a lot of people, it immediately resonates because people understand exactly what we're talking about. Those guns are in, the homes of, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, foster mom, foster parent, grandparent, whoever they're living with. These guns are in someone's homes. And so, we have a campaign going now called Flip a Mattress Friday. We want folks to go through, flip that mattress over, see what's going on under there, see what, check that room and just make sure that we're keeping the young people under our care safe. We're keeping the larger community safe. We're keeping them out of harm's way and away from foolishness. And Deputy Commissioner Dales and your entire team has been extremely helpful in that. So I just say thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member Bass. Flip a Mattress Friday. I'm going to remember that.
Mattress Friday.
There you go. Real quick, and I'm the last one before, I thank my members for joining me up at the Police Academy. Member Driscoll and Member O'Neill went up there and they actually used some of the simulators. We were able to observe the training for high-speed pursuit. We were able to look at your simulators by way of actual confrontation at a shooting or a robbery. And I'm just glad we did not tape or record Member Driscoll's reaction. That's all. I'll leave it there. But what we discovered was certain repairs under capital that needed to be done up there. The berm, removal of the lead from the backstop at the shooting range. Some minor, in my opinion, minor repairs in the facilities that are actually, so we rushed during the appropriations transfer ordinance to give some assistance. Have you been notified that that assistance to do those repairs, to do those removals is on the way?
I will turn this over to Deputy Dow Campbell. I'll call on her to answer that one. There she is.
Good afternoon, Councilman. So we have a list of capital projects, and they're certainly on it for the firing range, the gun berm. Is definitely one of the projects that is listed. We have a few others. It sort of goes in the order of need. So we have the 39th district that's in need of building repairs or maybe even a new facility. The 14th also is in need of renovations, and there's current work still being done to renovate the 15th district. So there's ongoing projects, but it is listed as one of the projects that we're certainly looking to update and get complete.
Well, that's good. We wanted to put that on the record. We kind of knew, but as what you can see from our members, supporting our police, keeping us safe, and having a fair justice system isn't an or, it's an and. And we appreciate what you do. Deputy Stanford is an alumni of the 19th district, and He was, you know, he spent a lot of time there and helped us to mitigate a lot of things. So some stuff I'm just not going to say. Just know I appreciate it. And so as we move forward with this and looking at what we have to do to fill those 800 openings, whatever we can do, please let us know, because it's a and not a or. So thank you for your testimony. We appreciate you, and keep up the good work. Oh, and I was thoroughly impressed with Member Isaiah Thomas's hit and run equipment update and some of his driving equity progress. So he has been on it like a laser beam to deal with that duality. And so thank you, guys, and thank you. And our prayers are with the commissioner.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Okay, we will take a 20-minute break so that the stenographer can take that break. And so we will reconvene at 10 of 3. Thank you all.
Thank you.